Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Starbase in southern Texas, SpaceX's launch, manufacturing, and test facilities supporting their Starship program. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing commentary for this special live stream coverage. We are once again partnering with LabPadre, and you're joining us on either the LabPadre stream or the stream here on Spaceflight Now. Welcome to both audiences and both channel member communities. It's good to be with all of you this morning as we're anticipating SpaceX's fifth flight test of its Starship rocket. On tap today is potentially a very special component to the mission. If conditions are right, they will attempt to catch this super heavy booster using the mechanical arms affixed to the launch tower, known as the chopsticks. Following stage separation, the super heavy booster, in a nominal Flight 5 mission, will fly back to the tower, hover in front where it currently is sitting, and then the chopsticks will be brought in, catch it, and lower it down eventually onto the orbital launch mount. As we are kicking things off this morning, again, want to welcome all of the audiences joining from both the LabPadre community and the Spaceflight Now community. We've got a whole host of folks here working hard behind the scenes to make this stream happen. So big thanks to all of the teams behind both Spaceflight Now and LabPadre. Want to let you know if you have comments or questions about this mission or other things happening in space, we have the super chat features open on both channels. So if you have a question to submit or something you'd like to talk about pertaining to space, and we'd like to keep things as on topic as possible here this morning, you can use the YouTube super chat feature. And not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as the timeline progresses, but you'll also be supporting what we all do here at LabPadre and Spaceflight Now. And for that, we are very much appreciative. To that end, we'll also be keeping an eye on some of the new channel members that join in throughout the course of the stream. I'll try to give you shout outs as we progress. Obviously, as we get closer to the planned liftoff of the rocket, we will go ahead and keep our focus on the mission at hand. But as we have some time in the run up to it, we'll go ahead and make those call outs as we are able. Time is currently 5:24 Central, 6:24 Eastern. Currently T-minus 1 hour, 35 minutes, 45 seconds and counting to the opening of the launch window today. SpaceX has a 30-minute window in which to make an attempt to launch this mission of the Starship rocket. If for whatever reason, because of potential weather-related concerns or technical issues, either on the launch infrastructure or on the rocket itself, SpaceX does have backup opportunities to launch potentially as soon as 24 hours. That turnaround time will be driven depending on A, what the issue is, of course, and B, at what point in the count they have reached. If they've begun fueling the rocket, that may push things back a little bit in order to give them time to replenish the liquid oxygen or the fuel on the rocket. Again, we are currently T minus 1 hour, 32 minutes, 40 seconds and counting to the opening of the window this morning. However, we do note that SpaceX has adjusted the start time of their stream. Again, with SpaceX adjusting the start time of their stream by what looks to be about 10 minutes, they may be working a technical issue. No comment at this point from SpaceX themselves as far as a new T0. Of course, as soon as we learn of one, we'll pass that along to you. One thing of note for those who've been watching the multiple operations for SpaceX today that were on the schedule, SpaceX was set to undock the Crew Dragon Endeavour from the International Space Station for the return flight of Crew 8. However, because weather is still poor along the coast of Florida, or in the recovery zones that are available to SpaceX, NASA and SpaceX have decided to waive off that opportunity this morning and pursue a different day for undock. So the Crew 8 astronauts and cosmonaut will have a little bit more time. There's been about a 2-week handover now and counting between Crew 8 and Crew 9. Of course, those astronauts and cosmonaut eager to see their family and friends again, but as any astronaut will tell you, a little extra time in space is never a bad thing. As we're getting things going here, I want to thank the astronomers for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, the astronomers. Thanks for your continued support as a channel member as well. As we're tracking the progress of the Starship rocket here in southern Texas, want to welcome to the LabPadre family, Erna, joining with the gold member status. Welcome aboard, Erna. And also a welcome to Pixie Delish joining at LabPadre Gold. Appreciate your support of the channel. Over on the Spaceflight Now side of the equation, want to thank Callistia Lee, one of our moderators over here for Spaceflight Now, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thanks to Sulfur for Lunch for gifting 5, and Leslie Daniel for gifting 5 as well. So to all those new channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Currently T-minus 1 hour, 26 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Again, we are standing by for what we believe will be a new T0 on this mission as SpaceX adjusted the start time of their stream, pushing back by about 10 or so minutes. Down here in southern Texas, there's a light breeze. We're about 3.5 miles to the west of the pad. It's a very calm morning here in the Boca Beach area of southern Texas, just outside of the Brownsville area. So as far as things on the watch list, weather likely not going to be an issue today, since we've been down here on the ground getting ready for this launch. It's been pretty idyllic, having made the drive out from Florida earlier this week and escaping the impacts of Hurricane Milton. It's a much calmer scene here in Texas, which I'll say this Floridian certainly appreciates, having a little bit of reprieve from that. Of course, our thoughts are still with all those who've been impacted by both Hurricanes Milton and Helene. A lot of good local groups on the ground doing work to help in that recovery effort. So if you'd like to assist, there's a number of organizations that you can donate to, and I'm sure that'd be much appreciated by all those impacted. Now currently T-minus 1 hour, 19 minutes, 53 seconds and counting to the opening of the window for SpaceX's Starship Flight 5. As is the case with these simulcast streams between LabPadre and Spaceflight Now, we usually have a special guest or two that we'd like to bring in to expand our coverage with those who have been thoroughly covering the Starship program. And we are once again very glad to be joined by friend of the channel and former Spaceflight Now compatriot, Mr. Stephen Clark, currently space reporter over at Ars Technica. Made the trek down here to be with us at Starbase. And Stephen, we were talking a little bit earlier that you have not missed a launch of Starship yet. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm excited to see this one. Other than the first launch, this is the Starship launch that I wanted to see most. I want to see the booster make an attempt to come back for a catch on the tower. And also, this is shaping up to be potentially the first Starship launch before sunrise, so that should make for a different experience as well.
Yeah, I'm sure all the photographers have been diligently preparing, including our own Adam Bernstein and Chief over with LabPadre, making sure all the camera settings are correct in order to capture either a pre-dawn or uh, sunrise Starship launch. But anyway, slice it should be pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and the atmosphere is quite clear this morning. The last couple of launches, we've had a lot of haze and cloud cover, and knock on wood, it looks like we won't have that this morning. It's hard to tell for sure with it being so dark out here, but I do see some stars. The forecast called for clear skies, so that is shaping up nicely as well.
Yeah, I missed seeing the comet on the horizon last night, but we got up this morning to get all of our ducks in a row. There was, yeah, pretty clear visibility on the stars, and you can see for miles out to not only Starbase, but looking over at South Padre Island, you could pretty clearly see all of the high rises and condos there. So, as far as visibility for those who are here locally, should be a pretty spectacular show once launch happens.
Yeah, can't wait to see this thing fly, and depending on how long before sunrise it actually launches, we may see a really interesting jellyfish effect as well as it climbs up into the sky.
Absolutely. No, I think that from a visual standpoint, it should be a very spectacular launch. But want to kind of drill down a little bit more into the meat and potatoes of before we get into what they're going to be doing. Let's talk about how we got to this point today. Since you wind the clock back a week, I would wager a guess that the vast majority of us didn't think we were going to be here right now, since there was obviously a number of questions on the launch license modification to allow this flight to happen and some of the back and forth between SpaceX and the FAA. I know there's been a lot of they said throughout the course that pretty much since Flight 4 and certainly since August. A lot to digest, but I guess what's been sort of your top line takeaway from all of the back and forth between SpaceX, the FAA, the politicians that have been weighing in?
Yeah, the FAA has been under a lot of political pressure. I guess it was a few weeks ago now, the administrator of the FAA was in Congress testifying and about Boeing's 737 issues, and got a question about Starship, and he was quite defensive in his response to the question about how long it was taking for them to review SpaceX's proposal for a launch license for Flight 5, in particular bringing the booster back to shore. The FAA had said they didn't expect to make a determination to whether to give SpaceX the license for Flight 5 until late November. And you're right, Will. That's what most of us were counting on until a week ago. And then SpaceX made the announcement that they're targeting launch as soon as October 13th, pending regulatory approval. And when SpaceX makes that kind of announcement, typically they have some back channel with the FAA that they have an indication that it's likely to happen on that date. And sure enough, the license came in a little less than 24 hours ago.
Yeah, and it seems like that sort of log line, if you will, to pull a movie industry reference, has been used by SpaceX a number of times between now and then the between August and now. I believe it was the first week of August when they published a post on X, formerly Twitter, saying the Starship upper stage and the Superheavy booster were ready for launch pending regulatory approval. And they've come back with some social media posts at least one other time that I can recall, maybe a two. But the one earlier this week was the first time that they specifically said we're ready for launch on a specific date. And that, I think, for a lot of us made it feel more real, especially since they also reached out to photographers for credentialing.
Yeah, that's right, Will. And yet the vehicles have been kind of in a state of quasi readiness for a couple of months. Of course, they didn't go through with their partial propellant loading test until the last couple of weeks. But I think they were waiting on to do that when they had a feeling that the launch date was actually getting closer. So the last couple of weeks, we've seen them complete some of the testing that they typically do before each launch. And during this time, since early August, we've also seen a lot of activity on the tower itself, on Mechazilla, with a lot of welding activity, a lot of 24-hour around-the-clock work, often at night because it's cooler out here in Texas in August at night than in the middle of the day. So it's been really interesting to watch, technicians wielding torches, welding torches all night long, sparks flying off of the tower, adding doublers and structural strengtheners to the structure to be able to handle the load of the super heavy booster when it comes back in for that catch.
Well, and I was going to ask you about that since we've seen some of those extra stress tests on the chopsticks, putting those. I'm not even sure exactly how heavy those multiple red sacks were in some photos that were taken by folks out here. Do you think those types of tests would have just happened on a shorter time scale had SpaceX known that they'd been given the clearance from the FAA to launch earlier? Or do you think there may have been a silver lining by being forced to wait and then allowing for more of a grace period to sort of piecemeal out some of these additional tests and maybe gain some more surety that the launch tower is ready to support the catch?
I'm not sure, actually. I wish I knew the firm answer to that. I do think that a lot of engineers will be more comfortable having done those tests and added those strengtheners and doublers to the structure over the last couple of months. Don't know if that was always going to be the plan or not, but I think that does give them more confidence going into this launch and potential catch.
We are now T-minus 1 hour, 11 minutes, 51 seconds and counting to the planned start time of the Starship Flight 5 mission. So far, SpaceX has not made any additional adjustments to the start time of their broadcasts, so suggests whatever they may be working through has not created a greater impediment at this point, but we're still standing by for a new T0. As we're checking some signs that things are beginning to move here, Stephen, you happen to catch something interesting. Why don't you tell us about some of the aviation signals that the flight may be in a good position to move forward today?
Yeah, well, we're seeing on FlightAware that the WB-57, which is NASA's reconnaissance and airborne imaging platform, that aircraft has departed Houston's Ellington Field and is heading towards South Texas. It is at an altitude of 45,000 feet. Looks like it took off from Houston Ellington Field about 20 minutes ago and is cruising toward the southwest along the Gulf Coast and looks like the flight plan brings it right over Brownsville and Boca Chica and Starbase.
And it looks like it's set to arrive just after 6 o'clock or so this morning. So in about 15-ish minutes by that gauge. So as Stephen was mentioning, for those unaware or just want a little bit of extra clarification, the Starship program, obviously not just important to SpaceX and its ambitions, but also to NASA, since a modified version of the Starship upper stage will be used as the human landing system, the lander that will bring astronauts down to the surface of the moon through the Artemis program, and is currently contracted for use on Artemis missions 3 and 4. Artemis 3, as of right now, set to launch no earlier than September of 2026. And in order to do that, of course, SpaceX will need to prove out the capabilities of Starship, not only as a launch vehicle in its own right, but a little bit further down the road, Stephen. Obviously, one of the big milestones that was not a requirement as part of HLS for SpaceX, but because of the architecture SpaceX chose, SpaceX suggested that a propellant transfer demonstration mission was going to be on their roadmap to the Artemis 3 mission. And earlier this week, we had the chance to talk with the deputy program manager of HLS, who said that they're targeting around the March of 2025 timeframe to begin that test campaign. Says that they're hoping around summer is when that on-orbit demonstration will really get underway. But obviously an important thing, not only for Artemis, but also for SpaceX's further deep space ambitions, thinking specifically Mars, of course.
Yes, so Starship, the architecture that SpaceX has pursued with this vehicle, requires in-space refueling in low Earth orbit for Starship to head on out toward the moon or Mars or any other deep space destination. So that does add some complexity to the architecture, but the benefit of it is that Starship theoretically will be able to carry payloads of 100 metric tons or more to any of those destinations down the road. So SpaceX is eager to see that propellant transfer demo, as is NASA. Nothing like that has ever been done in space with cryogenic propellants, especially of this magnitude. And we'll see 2 Starships dock in low Earth orbit. Both are supposed to launch from here, I believe, from the 2 launch pads. And we'll rendezvous in orbit and see propellants, methane and liquid oxygen transfer between the vehicles. And that is something that I am actually really interested in following, because not only is it critical for HLS and NASA's Artemis program, but it's a really interesting technical challenge. Lots of things that have to be taken into account, especially thermodynamics, because these propellants are cryogenic and stored, a couple hundred degrees below zero. And you have to make sure that both tanks are at the same temperature, essentially, as you transfer propellants. And there is one way one engineer had described it to me when I talked to him about this cryogenic refilling in orbit a few months ago, was if you don't have the right temperature in both tanks, when you start dumping cryogenics from one tank, from one vehicle, from one Starship into the other, it's like pouring water into a hot frying pan. It will just gasify and evaporate suddenly, and that would be quite explosive. So that's something that is, they have to be very specific, very particular about getting everything at the right temperature and the right conditions before they attempt this.
I think given that we're a little more than a month away from Thanksgiving, all of the failed home cooks around the country can empathize with that analogy. So that's a good one, Stephen. And of course, SpaceX isn't the only HLS provider. Blue Origin also working on their Blue Moon lunar lander, which, while having a very different method of both getting to the moon and operation while there, they also need to make sure that they can relatively reliably store those cryogenics on board the propellant transfer vehicle, which I believe is still being manufactured by Lockheed Martin. I don't think that's changed since that was announced, right?
I'm not aware of any change there. I have heard that Blue Origin is still trading whether to do the refueling in low Earth orbit or actually in lunar orbit. So that information is a few months old at this point, so I'm not sure if there's been a final decision made. I think the original architecture was in low Earth orbit, but they were trading, doing technical trades and kind of assessing whether it makes more sense to do it near the moon in cislunar space. But yeah, both HLS landers from SpaceX and Blue Origin do require propellant transfer and refueling in orbit in space. And of course, Starship is much bigger, so you're talking about much greater transfer of propellant for Starship than you are with Blue Moon.
Absolutely. Time is currently 5:57, 35 seconds Central. Currently T-minus 1 hour, 2 minutes, 17 seconds to the opening of SpaceX's 30-minute window. Want to go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, the milestones that we're anticipating as we continue to step through the count. But before we do, for those who may just be joining in our live stream here, either with LabPadre or with Spaceflight Now, welcome aboard to you all. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're watching special live coverage of Starship Flight 5, a collaboration between these two channels to bring you robust coverage with a variety of folks and insights on this mission as SpaceX looks to push forward its Starship program with hopefully the catch of the Superheavy booster following stage separation and the jettison of the hot stage ring. Not only the booster is set to come back to the launch tower where it will be caught by the chopsticks or the robotic arms that are affixed to the tower. The rocket will then be safed and then the booster slowly lowered back onto the orbital launch mount. What you're seeing there at the pad right now is preparations of the ground systems, making sure that the oxidizer, as well as the fuel for both the booster and the Starship upper stage, is at the correct temperatures before they start fueling the vehicle. Let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, let you know what we're watching for in a nominal timeline. T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will verify that go for prop load. Fueling here will begin at T-minus 49 minutes and 50 seconds with liquid methane, which is the fuel for both the ship and the Superheavy booster. Fuel loading begins T-minus 49 minutes, 50 seconds, followed a little more than a minute later by liquid oxygen on the ship upper stage beginning to load. T-minus 40 minutes and 40 seconds, booster fuel load begins, followed about 6 minutes later by locks on the booster starting to flow. T-minus 19 minutes and 40 seconds, the Raptor chill down begins on both the booster and the ship upper stage. Similarly to a Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy rocket, they'll blow some liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps to help protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. T-minus 3 minutes and 20 seconds. The ship prop load is complete. Booster prop load is completed, T-minus 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Fast forward to T-minus 30 seconds. That's when the SpaceX flight director will verify their go for launch. The water deluge system or the flame deflector will be activated at T-minus 10 seconds. You'll see that geyser of water start to gush up underneath the Superheavy booster. Helps protect both the launch infrastructure as well as dampen the sound coming from the rocket to protect the vehicle itself. T-minus 3 seconds is when the Raptor engine sequence will begin. And then if all the engines on the booster are healthy and ignite as expected, or at least enough of them. And as SpaceX will say, excitement is guaranteed for a liftoff at T0. Things have been busy around Starbase in preparation for this mission, taking a look at some video that we shot in the last couple of days. Photographers have set their cameras, and we had the chance to take a walkabout around Starbase and get a lot of different angles on the vehicle that you see there at the pad. Bringing Stephen Clark back in here, space reporter with Ars Technica, who's with us this morning for launch coverage and commentary. The last time we saw Starship launch, there was one of the 33 Raptor engines that did go out pretty quickly during its ascent, but didn't seem to impact the flight trajectory of the mission. This go around, do you think we'll see another flight more like Flight 3, where all the engines, if memory serves, did work as intended, or do you think we might see one or two potentially go out on its way uphill?
If I was betting, I would think all the engines are going to work fine. But this is a development program. Things like that happen. We saw an engine go out on the last flight, like you mentioned. We saw multiple engines go out on the first flight back in April 2023. And, we've even seen engine failures on Falcon 9, having flown hundreds of times on the first stage, even a couple of years ago. So, I would bet that the Raptors will all work. That's something that SpaceX has been working really hard on, getting the reliability of the Raptor engine to where it needs to be. And but we'll find out soon.
We certainly will. And speaking of flying, of course, the FAA not only came bearing news that Starship had clearance for Flight 5, also for Flight 6. And the Falcon family vehicles also getting clearance to fly again. Obviously, that was something that SpaceX was eager to get back to with its Starlink launches and flying for other customers. Big week for SpaceX getting back to those launches. It's been quite quiet at both the Cape and Vandenberg Space Force Base, uncharacteristically so.
Yes, indeed it has, Will. And of course, tomorrow we'll have the Falcon Heavy with Europa Clipper launching from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Hopefully we'll see the Starship launch this morning, and then I think the floodgates will be open again for more Starlink launches from both Vandenberg and Cape Canaveral.
You and I haven't had the chance to really dig into the Falcon upper stage issue, and some of the hiccups that SpaceX has encountered over the last couple of months for a rocket that has been, flying now for, well in excess of 300 times in its current iteration. Were you at all surprised to see how many times they had some uh, mishaps and issues that caused them to temporarily halt flight, or do you think that's just a byproduct of how often they're launching and just, statistically things come up when you fly as often as SpaceX does?
I think it's the latter. We've seen more than 300 Falcon 9 flights at this point, a lot more than 300, I think, at this point.
Okay.
And this was the anomaly back in July with the upper stage on the Starlink launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base was the first time we've had a Falcon 9 mission failure since 2016, the Ammo 6 explosion, which I count as a mission failure, but not necessarily a launch failure.
Right.
in my mind.
Not an in-flight failure.
The last in-flight failure was back in 2015. Mm-hmm. So quite a run of successful launches that SpaceX strung together over that time period. And of course, that was liquid oxygen leak issue on a sense line, and they've taken that particular component off of the upper stage while they redesign that part of the system. I'm not sure if they've reintroduced the redesigned sense line at this point on the upper stage. Haven't heard what caused the upper stage deorbit anomaly back a few weeks ago. I haven't heard a cause on that. The issue was that the upper stage engine burned long or overburned and caused the upper stage to fall short of its intended re-entry zone in the Pacific Ocean. Which does sound a little unusual to me. A lot of the speculation from, people who know about rockets when they first heard of the anomaly was that it, may have underburned rather than overburned, causing it to land long, farther downrange in the Pacific Ocean. But it was the opposite, and we've now heard that SpaceX, again, like you said, the investigations are closed, and the FAA has cleared them to return to flight for the Falcon 9. We saw the Hera launch last week. The FAA gave a one-time approval for that mission because the upper stage was heading into deep space. It wasn't going to have to perform a deorbit burn to come back to Earth, so that was not a safety issue. And then Europa Clipper was going to go forward anyway, it seemed like, because that's not an FAA licensed launch. That is a NASA launch, so NASA makes the final call regarding the Falcon Heavy launch for the Europa Clipper. But like I said, I think the floodgates are going to be open. There's a lot of Starlink satellites, a lot of customer payloads itching to go to space, and I think we'll get back to seeing a Falcon 9 launch every 2 or 3 days on average.
Yeah, and certainly, talking with the program manager for the Hera mission, they were watching their planetary launch window very closely and, had no qualms about being the first Falcon to fly as long as it meant that they could fly. And they had high confidence in the rocket performing as it did. And we saw, to your point about the lack of details on the most recent Crew 9 related investigation, haven't been provided with any specifics on that, but the FAA has officially closed out the mishaps that occurred back on July 11th, the Starlink 9-3 mission, and the Starlink 8-6 mishap on August 28th. So with all those clear off the table, SpaceX, in a good position to really get back to the races with the Falcon 9 rocket. Look for lots of activity, both at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Once the Falcon Heavy goes, they'll, of course, continue to use Pad 39A for Falcon 9 launches as well. And we were actually talking, just looking at the manifest as best we know it at this point. It seems like once Europa Clipper launches, we're not going to see a Falcon Heavy for another couple of years, which is, it feels strange to say now since we've been on kind of a run for that rocket, just given the mission payloads for certain flights had been delayed, and then the timing for others just was a weird sort of constellation of events that packed them all into about a year and a half, and then soon they're just going to be on the back burner for a long time.
Yeah, well, we did see about a 3.5 year gap between the third and fourth Falcon Heavy flights in the summer of 2019 until the fall of 2022. So that was quite a long gap. I don't hope it won't be that long after Europa Clipper, but I think there's a good shot of it being a couple of years, as you said. Nominally, the next Falcon Heavy launch, I believe, will be the Griffin 1 mission for Astrobotic, which I think is officially still holding to a late 2025 launch. But I have a feeling that will delay because that's a very sophisticated, very complex lander that Astrobotic is developing. They're also instituting some corrective actions from the problem they had on their smaller Peregrine lander with the propulsion system that prevented it from reaching the moon earlier this year. They want to roll those into Griffin. So there's a lot of work to do on the Griffin lander. So I would not be surprised if that slips into 2026. Beyond that, there's a couple of Space Force missions on Falcon Heavy scheduled, I think, in 2027. There's the Gateway power and propulsion element and the Halo habitat launching together on a single Falcon Heavy. I think that's in January 2027 at this point, if my memory serves.
It sounds right.
And so, yeah, there are more Falcon Heavies coming in the pipeline, but I think we'll have to wait probably until sometime in 2026 to see the next one.
Well, certainly there will be plenty of Starship launches between now and then. So as far as non-Falcon 9 SpaceX related flights, I think people will be more than satiated with what they still have left on the docket.
How many Starship launches will we see between Europa Clipper and the next Falcon Heavy launch, do you think, Will?
Ooh, that's a good crystal ball question. I'm going to guess once the second tower comes online and they start getting in a rhythm for the on-orbit propellant transfer demo in the summer of 25, I'm going to say somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 30, maybe more.
I was going to guess 30. So we have the same thought there.
Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of nebulousness about exactly how many flights it will take to fuel the tanker in such a way that it'll have enough propellant to then transfer over to, in this first instance, just another Starship, but eventually the HLS version of Starship. Asked the deputy manager, what the sort of models predict the boil off will be, and that's still a little TBD, and that's why they're doing this prop transfer demonstration mission, so that they have good real world data on that before they, of course, try to attempt that with the very precious future HLS version of Starship, because you don't want to go in with, or you want to close out, I suppose I should say, as much uncertainty regarding the vehicle that will safely transport astronauts to and from the surface of the moon as possible. You don't want to leave that up to chance as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think we'll see 100 or more Starship launches before SpaceX actually gets into that HLS campaign for Artemis 3. So I think we'll have to see Starships launching. Basically, the way I think about it is we'll have to see the Starship launching about as often as the Falcon 9 launches today to make the HLS campaign work. And so that's sort of a marker in my mind that we'll have to see a Starship launch every 2 or 3 days during that campaign from multiple launch pads.
Yeah, certainly the cadence that they're trying to work up to, from what we were told earlier this week, was about bi-weekly is what the HLS program office wants to see. So pretty much like about 2 weeks between launches from each tower, but launching from each tower once a week to create a rhythm, which, of course, a big component of that, something that both NASA and SpaceX are very eager to see, is catching the booster. Because if you can catch the booster and you're not having to create that kind of turnaround with getting new flight hardware in that respect out to the pad, and you can just recertify it, refuel it, and let it go, I mean, that's really going to change the time scale here.
Yeah, well, I think that's fundamental to the whole process is getting the boosters back where they can reuse them to enable that cadence. And of course, that also lowers the costs of doing these missions as well. I'm interested in seeing where SpaceX is in developing the tanker version of Starship and the depot version of Starship. We haven't seen a lot of hardware at Starbase for those new versions of Starship, the tanker and the depot. So I'm interested in seeing how those come together. And of course, the booster, I believe, will be the same basic design, with upgrades, but the same basic design that we're seeing now, I think, for at least those early HLS campaigns.
Absolutely. And want to go ahead and cue video here. We've got part of our conversation with the deputy program manager for the Human Landing System office. So want to go ahead and go to that now. In this clip, talks about what the HLS program office is specifically watching for with the Flight 5 mission of Starship, and some of the things we were just talking about as far as launch cadence when it comes down to preparing for the Propellant transfer demonstration mission.
SpaceX made the decision to try to make the leap forward and do the return to launch site. So I think we, from a NASA standpoint and from a human landing standpoint, are very interested in how that's going to work and how successful they can be. The attempt will be to bring the booster back to Boca Chica, hover near the launch pad, and be able to be grabbed with the mechanical arms. And what that's going to enable us to do rapid turnaround and be able to use those boosters on a rapidly reusable basis. What's interesting to us about that is for the architecture that SpaceX has proposed and is implementing, they're going to have to do several launches in order to aggregate propellant in low Earth orbit prior to going to the moon. And being able to rapidly reuse the boosters allows that cadence to, it demonstrates that cadence. I think we'd be looking at on a weekly, bi-weekly kind of basis of wanting to see launches to be able to fill the depot. Right now, SpaceX has their primary pad in Boca Chica. They're building their second pad in Boca Chica, and they intend to use Launch Pad 39A out of KSC to do this. So operations where you're launching maybe once a week out of each pad, so that each pad has a 2-week turnaround, but you're launching about on a weekly basis to go up, fill the depot, come back and reuse those boosters and tankers to get that operation. That's the kind of cadence that would be great. We don't really know what the boil off is. Some of the early flight experiments that we're looking for is that
And again, a big thank you to HLS Deputy Program Manager Kent Schnacke for talking with us earlier this week about the Starship program and what they're watching for with this booster catch attempt today. Just as a place and time, or a point in time marker, Stephen, you want to give folks an update on where NASA's aerial asset is at this point?
Yeah, well, it looks like the WB-57 is over South Texas. Looks like it's maybe over the Harlingen area at this point at 44,000 feet. And I expect it to go into a circular pattern over South Texas to await the launch, to get some imagery of Starship as it climbs into space.
As a reference for everyone, first off, want to thank you all for joining us with our live stream coverage, whether you're watching through Spaceflight Now or LabPadre. We're very glad to have you with us this morning. Local time is 6:19 a.m. Central, 7:19 Eastern. At this point, were SpaceX ready to launch at the opening of the window, they would have needed to have begun fueling by now. Taking a look at the SpaceX stream, they have pushed that back by another 10 minutes. So they are not at this moment fueling the rocket. The countdown clock on the top of our broadcast here is not accurate, but SpaceX has not provided a new T0. So essentially, for now, just consider that a countdown to the opening of the window. Again, SpaceX has a 30-minute window, 30, in which to launch this rocket. So we are standing by for additional updates from SpaceX on any potential issues they may be working. Of course, they are, for whatever reason, not ready at the start of the launch window that they have available to them today, but they do have backup opportunities into the future. Don't know exactly if it's every single day from here for a little while now, but we'll continue to track the progress. We were told that, depending on what may cause SpaceX to not be able to launch, if it comes to that, and I will stress if it comes to that, SpaceX could potentially turn around as quickly as tomorrow. If, and again, I will stress if they are unable to launch today, but that is not set in stone by any means. They do still have a pocket of time, just not a super expansive pocket of time. This is not like for those who've been. Actually, we do have word from SpaceX in the last 10 seconds. They say, and I quote, "The Starship team is go for prop load, weather looking ideal for today's flight." SpaceX will start sending out video through their broadcast about 35 minutes ahead of liftoff. The new T0 for the folks in the back is currently targeted for 7:25 a.m. Central. 7:25 a.m. Central. If we can reset our countdown clocks accordingly. Stand by for those watching the stream that is currently in work. Again, 7:25 a.m. Central Time is our new planned T0. That's about 5 minutes before the end of SpaceX's launch window that are available to them today.
Also, 2 minutes before sunrise here at Starbase.
So the hope for the jellyfish is still very much alive here.
I think the ideal time for the jellyfish would have been 7 a.m. though.
Well, sure.
But it should still be really spectacular to happen right at sunrise or just a couple of minutes before. We haven't seen that before. All of the previous launches have occurred after sunrise, so it'll be something different.
Exactly. So, Stephen, a new T0 that we've got working here, pretty close to the end of the window, not outside of the realm of possibility, but it doesn't give SpaceX a whole heck of a lot of margin at this point to play with.
No, it doesn't. We've seen SpaceX hold the countdown for a few minutes in the last moments of the countdown a few times. So if they run into that situation again, they're going to be up against the deadline of 7:30 a.m. Central Time for the end of the window. So it'll be interesting how SpaceX juggles that concern with the the time crunch of the end of the launch window. This is a relatively short window, as we've discussed, 30 minutes. SpaceX has had longer windows for previous Starship flights, so just a narrow sliver of time to get this mission off the ground.
Certainly a lot of eyeballs on this, not only here locally, but also across the country and around the world. The Starship program garnering a lot of public support and a lot of interest in seeing how it performs. I'm sure you may have overheard comments like this as you were gathering photos yourself, Stephen, around the orbital launch mount. But, folks comparing, some of the older folks that are here, thinking back to the Apollo days and, some, thinking what the world might be like if, NASA were trying to undertake a program like this on its own, what that might look like, how different this could be if this was, say, being built from the ground up, but over at Kennedy Space Center as opposed to out here in southern Texas. Are you hearing some of those types of comments as you were making your travels around the last couple of days?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one key difference is you can drive right up to the launch pad here at Starbase, whereas at Kennedy Space Center, you would be a dozen miles from the launch pad, typically maybe a little closer if you're on, Playa Linda Beach or something, get a little bit closer to the launch pad than that, but certainly not, a few hundred meters as you can here at Starbase. You can get that close to the vehicle as it's out on the pad, even the night before the launch, which is quite remarkable. And I think it's quite inspiring, too, for a lot of people to see the launch vehicle, the Starship, up close, to see the rocket take off. I've always thought that is the most inspiring thing if you want to inspire young people to get into space flight and get into science and STEM fields with a focus on space, is bring them to a launch, let them see a real rocket. I think that is key. It was for me. I saw my first launch when I was 13 years old, and I was hooked on space after that. So that's much more real than seeing something on TV or even seeing an educational program. There's a place for that. But I think the most inspiring thing for me was actually seeing it in person.
Yeah, I'm exceedingly jealous of that. I had to wait until I was a Florida resident in my 30s before I saw my first launch in person. But certainly, I think seeing it through the whatever portal you can is great, and just the cadence of launches, I think, is really making it more of a presence in people's lives, which is something that's in the pocket between the end of shuttle and the start of SpaceX really kicking up their cadence, and now with more commercial entrants coming into the game here between you had Astra for a little bit, of course, United Launch Alliance still continuing on. You've got some new players, Blue Origin about to launch for the first time. Relativity will eventually come back with their Terran R rocket, and of course down in New Zealand and up at Wallops Island in Virginia, you've got Rocket Lab, is pretty much the second runner-up to SpaceX as far as cadence. I mean, they've launched now more than 50 times with their Electron rocket. So there's a lot to inspire folks, and it's not just in the United States anymore. So I think certainly for folks down in New Zealand, having the opportunity to have their own space program through Rocket Lab is something quite extraordinary. And of course, Australia is also working to kick up some space activity down there as well. So the southern hemisphere is becoming much more active from a space front than it once was, and that can only be a good thing, right?
Yep, I absolutely agree. And there are spaceports in development in the UK and Norway as well for potential European companies to launch small satellites from. So I think that's very interesting. Of course, here in the United States. You mentioned Wallops Island, Virginia, Vandenberg Space Force Base out in California. Those launches from Vandenberg Space Force Base are often visible from Los Angeles, so millions of people can see those launches from a distance. And from Wallops, it's within visual range if the weather is good. From Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, and even New York City. I've seen photos from New York City of launches from Wallops Island.
With the new T0, just want to give a place and time for folks, especially now that we're starting to get some more people joining in with this live stream. If you're just joining us right now, you're watching special live launch coverage currently in progress. Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. We are partnering with LabPadre to bring you robust coverage of SpaceX's Starship Flight 5 mission. As the name suggests, this is the 5th time that SpaceX has launched the fully integrated Starship vehicle, flying a suborbital trajectory with an intention to splash the Starship upper stage down in the waters of the Indian Ocean. The change this time around, though, is that the booster is going to potentially make a return to landing site operation, coming back and being caught by what you see there at the top of your screen. It's a little bit dark and a little bit hard to really make it out, but you can see just near the top of the Starship upper stage are what are referred to as the chopsticks. These robotic arms that will, when launch happens, open wide to let the vehicle fly safely through. But when the booster comes back, it will hover for a brief moment in time, nominally, and allow the chopstick arms to come in for a quick catch, hopefully at both the right speed and with the right amount of pressure to safely recapture the booster, part of SpaceX's big push for rapid reusability with this vehicle. Ideally being able to refly both the ship upper stage eventually as well as the Superheavy booster multiple times. Of course, SpaceX no stranger to reusability. We were talking earlier about the Falcon 9 rockets. They've launched Falcon 9s now 379 times with the launch of the European Space Agency's Hera mission. 10 Falcon Heavies to date. Of course, this will be just the 5th in what will be a long line of Starship rockets as well. If you have a comment or question about this mission or about the happenings going on in the space domain, go ahead and use the YouTube Super Chat feature either through LabPadre or through Spaceflight Now. We'll be keeping an eye out for those and address them as we continue on through the countdown. Do want to note we are currently T-minus 51 minutes, 40 seconds and counting to the current T0 time of 7:25 a.m. Eastern. That is 7:25 a.m. Central, 8:25 a.m. Eastern, 12:25 UTC for our friends joining around the world. What that means for the timeline is in a little less than 2 minutes from now, the ship upper stage will be receiving its liquid methane, or the fuel that will support this mission here. Liquid oxygen will start flowing on board the ship upper stage, T-minus 48 minutes and 40 seconds, so about a minute after liquid methane starts flowing. Currently T minus 45 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Propellant load has begun on the ship upper stage, as well as liquid oxygen on the ship upper stage as well. Next fueling milestone is coming up at T minus 40 minutes and 40 seconds when booster fuel load begins. That'll be followed about 6 minutes later by liquid oxygen being flowed on board the Starship booster. As we're speaking, the sun has not risen yet, but its presence is beginning to be evident out here. We're in an elevated position about 3 or so miles away from the pad, a little bit farther actually. We're seeing a nice sort of like a rusty orange into light yellow into a blue gradient on the horizon. Just a beautiful morning here in southern Texas as SpaceX is now less than 45 minutes away from their planned launch attempt of the Starship rocket on its 5th go. And as we are continuing our countdown, we are still joined by our friend Stephen Clark with Ars Technica. And we are now being joined in by another friend of both LabPadre and Spaceflight Now, Mr. Marcus House, joining us from the aforementioned Southern Hemisphere, about 14 hours ahead of where we are here. So it's getting late in the evening. Marcus, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, everybody. Lovely to see you all here. What's going on today? Anything special?
Oh, just another morning in southern Texas, I believe.
Yes, it's looking kind of exciting, isn't it? So we've got this amazing event going on and the sunrise just coming up now, slowly to let us see the beast in bigger detail. I cannot wait for this thing. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, Marcus, and we were talking, as we've been progressing through the countdown and, SpaceX targeting within the last 5 minutes of the count here. Not a lot of margin for launch, but, a lot of really interesting milestones that they're going to try to accomplish with this. I mean, we've talked quite a bit about the catch, but one thing that we haven't really delved into at this point is what's going to be happening with the ship upper stage. I mean, last time we were together virtually was for Flight 4, and while it seems like it might not make it, the flap on the ship upper stage really hung in there. SpaceX trying to do a lot to capitalize on that and improve it. Can you talk from your perspective about the heat shield tiles and the overall shielding that SpaceX has been working on between flights 4 and 5, and what your expectations of how it will perform will be?
Yeah, look, it's been a huge upgrade, really, and we watched for a good month or so, maybe even longer, actually, now that I think about it, when they were basically stripping off all the tiles off this ship that we're seeing right here now and replacing the entire black heat shield there with a much upgraded one. Now, that much upgraded one has got a secondary layer. I believe it's sort of got an underlay of some sort, and then it's got sort of a thick ablative layer on top of that, a black ablative layer. Sort of almost looks like a huge, big, thick rubber sheet, but I'm sure it's more involved than that. And then on top of that, you've then got the heat shield tiles that are supposed to be also upgraded. And those appear to be a little thicker, but it's hard to say. But they're certainly supposed to be rated as a stronger shield. So with all those things together, even if there is a tile loss here and there, the underlay, the ablative layer underneath, should stop the burn through completely. And with any luck, we won't see a flap hanging off at all this time. And even more exciting, I think, is that they've got cameras, I believe, quite close now to all 4 flaps. So we should be able to, hopefully, SpaceX will broadcast them, but we should be able to see perspectives from each of the flaps quite close up. But in the last one, we still had cameras looking at the aft section, but they were sort of a lot further along the body. So these cameras, I believe, are much closer. So yeah, with any luck, closer views, no burn through, and a beautiful re-entry all the way close down here to Australia, the west side of Australia. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing thing.
Absolutely. And, earlier in the broadcast, we were talking about the importance for this mission for the Human Landing System program within NASA, since Starship Upper Stage, a variant of it, will be used as the lander, which will take astronauts down to the surface of the moon. And jumping off what Marcus was just saying, want to go to a soundbite now from the Deputy Program Manager for the HLS office. Again, this is Dr. Kent Shinaki, who in this clip is talking about some of the collaboration, not only in a broad sense between SpaceX and NASA on the Starship program, but very specifically to what we're just talking about. Not so much the heat shield on the outside, but an element within the ship itself. So let's go ahead and listen to part of our conversation. Again, this is Dr. Ken Shinaki, the Deputy Program Manager for the Human Landing System Office based at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Specifically not on the heat shield. Where we have been doing some in-house testing on the behalf of SpaceX is on their MMOD thermal tiles for in space. So not the heat shield for the reentry, not the hot side, but being able to have the MMOD tile and the reflective for keeping the cryos cold. We brought a couple of those tiles in and did some testing. SpaceX was very happy with the capability, both at Glenn Research Center and Marshall's test capability. And so we've expanded that relationship and being able to do some testing for them.
And again, I want to thank Dr. Ken Shinaki for his time and insight into the Human Landing System element of all this. Time now, T-minus 38 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. At this point, we are stepping into another fueling milestone here.
Yeah, it looks like we might be seeing some frost lines finally, so timeline's looking good. Pushed back a little bit from 7 by the looks of it.
Yeah, at this point, liquid methane is flowing on board the booster, and we are about 4 or so minutes away from booster LOX loading begin.
The venting from those hippos looking pretty energetic there, isn't it?
Certainly is. And, Marcus, obviously you've been watching closely the development of not just the Starship program, but really Starbase here in general. Want to just get your thoughts on the evolution that we've seen, most specifically with the timeline between Flight 4 and 5. But if you want to step back and talk about some of the big infrastructure changes that SpaceX has been making down here at Starbase and the importance and impact that that's had on these missions and getting ready for future flights.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's been so much going on even since Flight 4 and the upgrades that we're sort of seeing, which will let them load this vehicle faster. Not necessarily faster than Flight 4, but the upgrades that happened before, around that time have certainly let them lower the amount of time it takes to fully fill this huge beast. It's a gigantic vehicle, and the amount of propellant in there, yeah, again, scale can always be kind of deceiving because from this far back, it just looks like a rocket, right? But that 9-meter wide tank, it's something you only kind of need you really need a close up and a human for scale to really comprehend just how much propellant is going to be flowing into that. So they've done a whole bunch of upgrades to the tank farm. Obviously, the biggest change they've made over the last 12 months is removing the big vertical tank farm. So there was the 8 big vertical tanks there. There was issues with those tanks. It was deemed that the methane was too close to other commodities and things, so they wasn't allowed to use the methane in the tanks that was originally there for them. So that stopped being used, and they put in the horizontals for that. But then over time, they've whittled away the rest of the tanks until the entire set of nitrogen, oxygen and methane are all now in the horizontal tanks that we see from above. If you've watched LabPadre shots, they're just beautiful shots of the tank farm as it exists today. But the venting that you're sort of seeing over there, the very energetic venting on the left side of the screen, well, that you were seeing on the left side of the screen, they were essentially they're all driven by these sort of hippo units, and what they are, that's sort of a nickname for them, but they're the sub-chillers. And the sub-chillers take nitrogen. They fill these huge tanks, these big hippo units with nitrogen, which is much colder, or quite a bit colder, maybe not much, not colder, but quite a bit colder than the liquid oxygen and the liquid methane. And they then pump those two commodities, the methane and the oxygen, into those hippos through little tubes so that they can cool down even further, closer to their freezing points, and the nitrogen then takes that heat, converts it to nitrogen steam, and that's what we see venting out there. So there's 8 of them, I think, from memory, 8 of them, I think, on the liquid oxygen side, and there's only 4 of them on the methane side. And the methane side will be venting slightly less because there's less of them, and also because there's a much greater percentage of oxygen overall. So all these things together have been upgraded. There's been additional sub-chiller units added in the last 6 months or so, or even before that, and the oxygen side in particular has been upgraded quite a lot. So yeah, what we're seeing there with all that venting is these systems going flat out there, filling the Starships.
And it looks like we're just seeing a flyby of NASA's aerial asset that will be taking some imagery of the Starship rocket as it makes descent. Oh, it's a helicopter, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's a helicopter we saw land earlier. That was weird.
Yep, so of course that will be well out of the way by the time SpaceX needs to launch. Creating a clear airspace, of course, is exceedingly important for all rocket launches, especially one that's still very much in a test campaign like Starship is.
So I'd love to know from the comments what people are looking forward to the most in this flight, as if it's not an obvious question. Yeah, sound out on that, and if you've got any questions about that process and what it looks like, let us know. Nice shot of the helicopter landing there.
We do have one from this super chat to the LabPadre side of the stream from ITV. Appreciate your support this morning. Asking if there's any new data being collected in this flight that wasn't gathered in the previous flights. Well, I think to Marcus, your point there, obviously one of the biggest pieces of data that they're looking to collect is, A, can they catch the booster as they believe they can? And if they decide during the ascent that they're not ready to do that and go for another splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico like they did last time, what may be the impediment to that, and what can they do to correct that for Flight 6? Is there anything else that kind of stands out to you, Marcus, from a data gathering standpoint that you're, if you were SpaceX, really wanting to know and learn about this particular mission?
Well, I think with every flight, they're really analysing the performance of each of those Raptors. Obviously, with the 33 engines there's always a lot that can be improved. We had an engine issue with one of the with the last flight, obviously, but it didn't cause any impact. There's no problem. There's plenty of margin with the 33 engines they've got there. So if we see an engine or two out, it's no big drama. They can still do the mission. Although I would assume that any engine issue anywhere is probably going to abort their attempts to catch, especially if it's an inner engine, of course. So what happens with the landing? The inner set of engines will light back up, not the outer 20. The ring of 20 only fire for the ascent, and that's because each of those 20 has got a Raptor quick disconnect on the outside, a connection point that feeds in the spin-up gases for it to fire up. After it's launched, they can't fire it up again, so only the inner set of 13 can light back up. So if we see any issue with any of those 13, I would say that's probably it for the attempt for the catch. That said, right through the hot staging separation that we saw last time, hopefully we'll get camera views on that again, and right at the end of that boost back burn, that's when they're going to make the decision to actually go for the catch attempt. That doesn't mean there's no other abort scenario. That's when a manual command needs to be sent from ground, from the launch commander, to say, yes, we're happy for this to proceed through to catch, and then its trajectory will reflect that. Otherwise, it's going to obviously come down in the ocean. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. I think everything to do with the booster is going to be super analyzed. Everything to do with the ship, of course. We want to see a nice clean entry, like we were saying before, with the upgraded heat shield. But to a degree, that's been done before. It's been proven that it can be done before. They're just trying to improve that and get no burn throughs. So I hope we see the exact same thing, a nice soft splashdown, even more on target. Last time it wasn't quite on target because of the burn through. So hopefully the Starship will land on target, and we'll see a catch. The interesting thing in my mind, though, is what's going to happen in another abort scenario further down the line. So let's say, because one thing to consider is that the booster, it's coming in from very high, well up above 100 kilometers, and it's in free fall. It doesn't do an entry burn like Falcon 9 does. So what that means is it's hitting the atmosphere at a super speed, speed that, to be honest, I'm still surprised that they are doing it. I would have thought they would have some sort of entry, just a little, an entry burn, just to slow it down a little, or help dissipate some of the huge forces from the atmosphere as it hits it hard. But there's no mention of an entry burn even still, and that means that as it fires up the actual landing burn itself, the catch burn, it's moving extremely quickly. And if something goes wrong with that burn, any of those engines at startup, I would assume that there's an abort scenario there which will swing it out of the way. How far away it will impact is a great question. I've heard a lot of speculation on this, and I'm not really prepared to speculate myself because I'm more than likely to be wrong. But there's a lot of speculation to say that it can't actually get fully out into the ocean again at that point. So it would probably impact just out of sight, sort of in a beach area. But we'll see. We could be wrong about that. So it's going to be extremely exciting to find out.
Absolutely. And we are now T-minus 28 minutes, 43 seconds and counting at this point. Fueling on both the ship upper stage and the booster down below on all 4 tanks is currently in progress. The next milestone we're looking for is coming up in less than 10 minutes, at T-minus 19 minutes and 40 seconds, when the Raptor engine chill down for both the Superheavy booster and the Starship upper stage will begin. Want to note
thank you for everybody joining as well. It's amazing seeing people from all over the world, as always. Interested to know where everybody's from, actually. There was a lot from Australia earlier, but it's getting pretty late here now.
Yeah, if you haven't already, whether you're watching on the Spaceflight Now version of the stream or LabPadre, go ahead and jump in the live chat. Let us know where you're watching from. It's always good to see where people are joining us from around the world. This is a launch of global interest, and I know we are speaking to a global audience. So thanks to you for wherever you're watching from right now, whether it is through LabPadre or through Spaceflight Now. We're very grateful for you being here with us this morning. We'd certainly appreciate it as well. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. That will allow folks to find this live coverage as you're continuing to watch. And we tick down to now less than 28 minutes, coming up on 27 minutes before the planned liftoff of Starship on Flight 5. As the sun is beginning to come up
there too.
Yeah, and the sun is really starting to rise up from our vantage point. Fortunately, for camera purposes, the sun will not be arcing right behind the rocket, so we should get some good light on it without it being too obstructive to cameras where we are. Stephen Clark, want to bring you back into the conversation as you're also getting your cameras ready to snap some photos of this rocket as it launches. Now that we've got some more light in it, I mean, we certainly got the sense that it was going to be a good morning from a visual standpoint. Obviously, getting lovely photos and video of a rocket from a consumer standpoint is always a delightful thing. But how valuable is it to have a morning like this and to be able to see a sunrise launch of Starship from both SpaceX and NASA's perspective, especially getting this good of visibility?
I think the weather we're seeing here at Starbase this morning is really ideal. I mean, this is the most beautiful morning. I've been here for all 4 previous missions. I think this is the best weather, the most favorable conditions I've seen. So I do expect to have great visibility as the Starship climbs into the sky. And I think it's nice to have the good conditions because there will be more cameras that can see the vehicle as it goes into space. Both SpaceX's cameras as well as all of the professional and amateur photographers all around South Texas and even in Mexico. And so I think we'll see some great visibility. And of course, from NASA's perspective, one of the best assets they have is not really dependent on weather. They have the WB-57 airborne imaging platform, which is over South Texas with optical cameras, infrared cameras, able to see quite a bit of detail. And it's at a high altitude. It's flying higher than commercial airliners at about 45,000 feet. So it's well above any cloud cover that they've ever had here for any launch of Starship. And I think that's one of the most beneficial assets that NASA has in order to track and see what's really happening with Starship. Of course, SpaceX has all these cameras all over the vehicle, seeing how the mission is going on the booster and on the ship. And I think those are really invaluable as well to determine exactly how the vehicle is performing on the way up.
Well, and to that point, and Marcus, feel free to weigh on this in a second here as well. Having all of those camera views and, the additional ones that are on this vehicle that weren't present before, coupled with having onboard Starlink that can provide continuous video feeds without having to drop, obviously is, visually great from a broadcast perspective, but, offers some really critical insight in real time to both the SpaceX teams as well as to NASA and obviously post-flight analysis. I guess first to Stephen and then to Marcus, with some of those, onboard cameras and really seeing that fine detail, what are some of the things that you think they're going to be most watching for with the performance of, let's say, the ship upper stage, but also the Super Heavy booster as well?
First thing that comes to mind is the heat shield on the ship. They've upgraded the heat shield. They've replaced all of the ceramic tiles on the vehicle. They've added that layer underneath the tiles for additional protection from the heat, which is going to be about 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit as it comes back through the atmosphere. So we saw in Flight 4 pieces of the heat shield being liberated and falling off the vehicle as it got deeper into the atmosphere and got really subjected to those extreme temperatures. And thanks to the Starlink connectivity and the cameras, SpaceX was able to see exactly how the vehicle performed, and there was no guessing about how the heat shield did. They had video evidence, and so that really spurred the decision from SpaceX's perspective to make these changes to the heat shield that SpaceX is gonna test on today's flight. From the booster perspective, onboard cameras from Flight 4, I'm not sure exactly what we'll see today, but from previous flights, we've seen really good views of the grid fins doing their job, articulating, actuating to control the stability of the vehicle as it comes back to the ground. And I think that's something that SpaceX is keenly interested in seeing. Of course, seeing the Raptor engines, seeing how they perform, also important.
And Marcus, from your vantage point, what are you kind of watching for through the lens of those cameras, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, for me today, it's all the booster. I mean, it's going to be exciting to watch the ship going through all its phases after that. But the booster process all happens so rapidly. I think it's under 7 minutes, I think, before it's back in the arms of the tower if they go that way. So there's going to be a lot of shots. I'm hoping they share a lot of those shots of the descent, especially as it comes down. And the great thing about it coming down potentially close or at the launch site completely is that the signal is going to be great. Hopefully the signal is going to be great. So we really want to see some nice clear footage of that descent process, and we want to see obviously incredible performance of at least all the inner set of Raptor engines like we said before. So I think I'm hoping that we'll actually get to see some engine bay cameras, because we don't really get to see those a lot. I'd love to see some fire from the booster. So yeah, it's going to be incredible to see. And they always sort of surprise us, remember, like each time we sort of get to see camera views here and there that we haven't seen before, and there's plenty of cameras for them to share. I think they just like to tease us with a little new view that we might not have seen before that we can all talk about and digest. So, yeah, it's a huge mystery and one that hopefully will be unfolding very quickly in about 22 minutes.
It's coming up before you know it. In fact, we're currently T-minus 20 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. We're coming up on the next milestone in this countdown timeline. That, of course, is the Raptor engine chill for both the Super Heavy booster and the ship upper stage is coming up. T-minus 19 minutes and 40 seconds is when that sequence will begin. Getting some great views
just
from
at
our
the
cameras around
same
here.
time. Yeah,
Oh,
I was
sorry,
just going to
Mark,
say
go
at
ahead.
the same time I'm sort of digesting the feed from SpaceX that's playing at the moment, and they've shown some pretty incredible shots of the booster underneath with all the engines sitting there ready to go. It's like, oh wow, hope we get to see some of these camera views as it ascends.
Yeah, and certainly, from the last mission launch, having an aquatic asset out there to shoot the Super Heavy booster, if they do decide to make another splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico, having that team out there to capture that video is obviously going to be great to see. If they decide to not catch the booster, which, of course, I think we're all hoping that they certainly will make that attempt. SpaceX will make the call in real time during the ascent to see if they are in a good position to make that catch attempt.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people sort of bet down on the percentage chance that they're going to make it that far with the catch attempt. It's like, I don't know, I kind of feel like it's 50-50 for them to give the thumbs up for it to return. That doesn't necessarily mean it's 50-50 for the catch, but to give the thumbs up that everything's going well to that point. We've seen some pretty nice clean ascents and stage separations and everything the last few flights. So unless we sort of see some engines out, I think the chances are pretty good.
Yeah, just from our sense of things, it seems like they're, feeling probably as confident as they potentially can at this point, given all of the testing that's been done. Now, T-minus 18 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. The engine shutdown sequence is underway at this point. A little more light in the area here around Starbase, getting a good view of the high bays just down the road from the orbital launch mount, as well as the second tower. I think also, Stephen, just, having the second tower as far along as it is right now, while it's not ready to support a launch tomorrow, say, it's much closer than it has been in recent months. And, if they attempt to catch it, if something were to go wrong, they do have a backup that's going to come online in fairly short order, so it potentially wouldn't set them back too terribly far. Is that kind of your sense of SpaceX's, as much as we have a sense of SpaceX's thought on this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think you're right on, Will. Having the second pad is kind of an insurance policy for SpaceX. If something goes really awry with the catch attempt on the existing tower, they have another one coming online. Of course, the booster, when it comes back, is going to have its tanks are going to be relatively empty. So I'm not sure. Marcus may have a better idea of what exactly the explosive or potential is of the booster if it really went sideways as it comes into the tower. How much damage could it actually do? Obviously, it could damage things like the quick disconnects and the umbilicals. Things like that. I can imagine soft goods would be exposed and at risk of damage or destruction. But the structure itself, I can't imagine. Don't want to say it's impossible to happen, but I cannot imagine the structure actually suffering any significant damage. But things like the plumbing and the umbilicals could be very at risk of damage if something goes poorly during this catch attempt.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about a mostly empty vehicle is that all of the all of the space taken up in them is mostly gases at that point, right? So gases explode really quite easily, but there's not a huge volume of propellant left in it, so the explosion would hope be minimal. That doesn't mean that it can't cause a lot of damage, but I think in the end, the tower's pretty strong. The actual main structure of the tower's pretty strong. If they break off the arms, they've got another set of arms that they could potentially engineer in there, or they've probably even got a backup set somewhere else that they've got. Who knows? But the main bit of damage will probably be the orbital launch mount itself. So if it sort of brings down the arms with it, or even if the arms miss it, it's probably going to directly impact, although admittedly slowly, if the landing burn's going well. So yeah, the actual orbital launch mount might be the thing that takes the damage, and that is pretty tricky to repair, especially if they don't want to rebuild it, because obviously they're building a very different design for Tower 2. So yeah, look, we hope for a catch and hope for not too much damage. Absolute worst case scenario is that they somehow end up with the booster hitting the tank farm. So let's just not even think about that. It's one of those things that is always there in the back of people's mind, though. I'm assuming that they would need to see extremely good control before they would even attempt coming in through that landing burn. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It's looking beautiful there in the sunrise.
Yeah, beautiful conditions here at Starbase. It's quite a morning.
It's amazing. Barely any clouds in the sky, almost no wind at all. Like it really is the perfect launch condition. So hopefully everything's going smoothly. If we can get to the launch, it's like that'll be the best weather I think we've had for a launch of Starship yet, if it does fly now.
Definitely agree. It's the best conditions. I've been here for all 4 flights, and there's been nothing as picture perfect as this morning from all the previous flights I've been to.
Yeah.
Just as a point in time, we're T-minus 13 minutes, 6 seconds. If for whatever reason SpaceX comes into a technical glitch toward the end of the countdown, they do have the ability to hold at T-minus 40 seconds if necessary. We're also now a little less than 10 minutes away from the ship prop load wrapping up on the upper stage, and they'll conclude booster prop load at about T-minus 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
The thing that really blows my mind with all this is that they've got it down to such a routine, or even though this is like, flight test 5, it's so routine now to do this filling process and static fires and all this kind of thing. So it's quite rare for them to abort anything at this point at the moment, which I think is a great sign of progress through this whole system. And so I think the chance of it launching here in 12 minutes or so is really quite good. And then any of the chances of various phases of the mission at that point become the question marks. But I'm quite confident that we'll see it fly. And where in the first couple of flights it was extremely nerve-wracking watching it about to take off, don't feel that at all now. Now it's nerve-wracking watching it come home. So the butterflies haven't quite hit yet, like they did here a few flights ago. But look at that. It's beautiful procedure they've got down here now.
And just want to note for our viewers on both the LabPadre and Spaceflight Now streams, this is coincidentally not the only suborbital launch attempt on tap today, and also not the only one happening from Texas. As we speak right now, Blue Origin is preparing and doing its final checks ahead of the planned launch of its New Shepard suborbital rocket. Their current T0 is targeting 8:27 a.m. Central. So just about an hour after we see Starship launch from here, if all continues to remain on track, Blue Origin will also send up its New Shepard rocket on a quick, roughly 10-ish minute in total jaunt up to suborbital space, and then the capsule will return for planned soft landing near Van Horn, Texas, which is a little more than 700 miles from where we are here near Boca Chica Beach. So lots of activities today. And for those wondering, if you're just joining us now, why we have not mentioned the return of the SpaceX Crew Dragon Endeavour from the International Space Station, that's because SpaceX and NASA waved off that return attempt today and that planned undocking, since the weather around Florida in the recovery zones is not conducive to a safe splashdown. So NASA and SpaceX will continue to track the weather conditions along the Sunshine State and look for the next opportunity for undock. Lots of folks out here at our watch site gearing up in the announcement that we are now less than 10 minutes away, currently T-minus 9 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. As things are, at this point in the countdown, progressing smoothly for SpaceX in anticipation of a liftoff, again at 7:25 a.m. Central Time. That is 8:25 a.m. Eastern, 12:25 UTC for those joining around the world. And as we're coming into the last 10 minutes of the count, if you're just joining us on either the Spaceflight Now or LabPadre streams, welcome aboard. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're watching our live special coverage in progress of Starship Flight 5, with the teams of both LabPadre and Spaceflight Now working hard behind the scenes, both here in Texas as well as in Florida, to support this live coverage. It's a big effort, a big undertaking, takes a lot of folks and people power and a lot of missed sleep. So if you would do us the courtesy of giving whatever stream you're watching, either LabPadres or Spaceflight Nows, please give it a like to allow more folks to find their way into this live coverage, as we are now about 8.5 minutes away from the planned liftoff of the Starship rocket you see there on your screen. This mission flying a suborbital trajectory with an intended splashdown of the ship upper stage in the waters of the Indian Ocean, very similar to Flight 4. And Stephen in the back, I'll call an audible. If you can go to slide 7, that shows the launch trajectory. Just want to give folks a quick rundown. What you're about to see here is the flight path that was used for the Flight 4 mission, which could potentially be essentially a repeat here of what we see today, with a liftoff and a splashdown of the Superheavy booster in the Gulf of Mexico. The key difference between what you're about to see here and what we hope to see in real life is, instead of the booster splashing down and simulating a catch in the Gulf of Mexico, hovering for a bit before hitting the Gulf waters, if SpaceX feels like they're in a good position to do so, today will potentially be their first catch of the booster using the robotic arms called the chopsticks at the launch tower. So following stage separation, you can see the path of the Starship upper stage. This part of the mission will be exactly the same as what you're seeing here. It'll follow the same flight path, flying south of Madagascar and splashing down off the coast of Australia there in the waters of the Indian Ocean. SpaceX looking to see some increased performance out of the heat shield on the ship upper stage, helping to preserve more of it intact, and hopefully few, if any, of those heat shield tiles will fall off of the Starship upper stage as it makes its way back, streaking through the atmosphere, going through some peak heating before making its ultimate descent and splashdown in the waters of the Indian Ocean.
Feeling looking great now too. We're up over the 90% for the Starship and close to 90 there for the booster as well. So very close, just as we kick into 6 minutes.
T-minus 6 minutes.
Yeah, with less than 6 minutes to go, as you can see, as Marcus was just saying, you've got some of the fueling percentages there. CH4 is just
Nice shot right there. The amount of venting that I think that we've got going on there is always crazy to see. So you can sort of see just how much nitrogen has to be boiled off to super chill the oxygen and the methane as it enters the vehicle. And they do this, of course, to densify the oxygen, especially. They densify that so that they can fit more into the vehicle. So you essentially can get more bang for your buck if you just chill it down a little more. So that's all that venting you're seeing. Most of that is going to chilling down the propellant even further, closer to its freezing points. Beautiful shots. It's the one thing about the SpaceX stream. It's like it's hard to get shots like that. The heat shield you're sort of seeing there, it's a little hard to tell from that angle, but you can sort of almost see in parts of it, you've got that thicker black underlay. Great shot there out over the ocean. I hope we get this drone shot as the booster's coming down, because that's going to be something else to see, isn't it? Huge vent there from the tower. It's a good indication that we are about full. And there we go, in the 2-minute mark, almost there, and it is just... The butterflies are starting now, I've got to say. Roger. Great shot under the engine bay there. 33 engines. All of those inner ones, the 13 inner ones especially, need to be performing beautifully for this landing. Cheers are erupting from around SpaceX. Down under the 1 minute mark.
And thank you for joining us, Marcus. Just so everyone knows, we lost power at our viewing site. So it's Marcus and myself now providing commentary with 30 seconds to go.
Hey, happy to be here. Down under 20 seconds, come on. I'm actually going to try to be fairly quiet so you can take all this in. Can't guarantee that. Go, baby. Yes!
Thirty seconds into the
Beautiful engines.
It's going to be completely behind real time.
Altitude 5 kilometers, speed 950 kilometers an hour. T plus 1 minute, altitude 9 kilometers, speed 1200 kilometers an hour. All engines are burning. Altitude 14 kilometers, 1500 kilometers an hour, T plus 120.
So Ezra, when we switch over to SpaceX,
Altitude 22 kilometers, speed 2100
Oh, wow.
kilometers an hour.
Wow.
T plus. Stand by for hot staging. 36 kilometers altitude, 3,300 kilometers an hour, T plus 2 minutes. Stand by for hot staging. 53 kilometers up, 4,600 kilometers.
Come on.
230.
Beautiful.
Hot staging. 64 kilometers up, 5,200 kilometers an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And we
Good for
did
tower.
hear that the tower is go for catch, so that was one of the big criteria we were looking for.
This view
We'll
here.
wait to hear that the go for catch has been sent.
Beautiful view here from the ship.
And so exciting to hear that we got a go for booster catch. That means it's going to be a really exciting morning. Again, the booster is making its way back towards now land in order to make that catch attempt in the tower.
So incredible to see these views. You can see the ship on the right-hand side of your screen. All 6 Raptor engines are under full power. Once again, the booster is making its way back to the launch site. We are going to try and catch it using the chopsticks on the launch tower, the exact same tower that it just launched from just, 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, and the booster.
Starship on nominal
Guys,
trajectory.
I can confirm the command was sent for
This is
the booster
amazing.
to come back.
That is
So I'm
incredible
looking
news.
up right now. It's pretty much right overhead of us, and we can see it starting to come down.
I can't wait for us to hear the sonic boom through Dan's mic.
Right.
That is going to be incredible. It was so cool to hear the liftoff. And so once again, a successful on-time liftoff of Starship Flight 5. The ship has separated from the booster. The booster is there on your screen. It is making its way back to the launch site. We are going to attempt the catch using the chopsticks. We did hear the confirmation that the command was sent to the tower. We are go for catch.
And in order to.
And guys, we should just be about 30 seconds away from our landing burn.
Oh,
It's going to happen
wow.
in 3 phases.
Look at
We're going to
this.
let 13 engines burn off all of that velocity. Oh, we can see it coming down through the plume.
Booster coming in hot for booster catch.
We're going to ignite 13 of those Raptor engines, and this view is incredible right now. You can see how fast this vehicle is moving on
All
the
13.
left-hand
Go, go, go.
Landing burn
3.
has been ignited.
Oh
We're
my
now down
god.
to 3 Raptor engines. We can see those chopsticks now in here.
Are you kidding me? Oh my god.
Booster having current shutdown.
Make a bill on top of the booster.
This is absolutely insane. On the first ever attempt, we have successfully caught the Superheavy booster back at the launch tower.
What an incredible view!
Are you kidding me?
Dan,
Wow.
I don't know about you, but we're losing our stuff up
Starship
here.
is terminal bed.
Guys, I'm sorry. Like, even in this day and age, what we just saw, that looked like magic.
What?
That
Oh,
was-
wow.
Dan,
Wow.
your view must have been insane. We are still going wild over here over this.
Folks, this is a day for the engineering history books. This is a live view of the Super Heavy booster as it has just been successfully caught back at the very same launch tower that it just came from. Dan, I love this. You
That's
are
the most
reflecting
amazing
exactly
thing I've ever
what
seen.
everybody else here in Hawthorne, except maybe a little bit more because you got to see it with your own eyes.
How was that?
Ship
We
window
got
cut
it.
off.
Well, I mean, like, I can't even describe that. Oh, by the way, main engine cut off, ship's in orbit, but I am like shaking right now. That was.
Yeah, This is not,
Yeah,
I mean,
let's check in on Ship.
it's hard to believe that.
Starship nominal orbit insertion.
All right, exciting news there. It's hard to believe that, booster isn't the only excitement that we have today. Just confirmation there, a gorgeous view of planet Earth behind the ship.
Absolutely speechless.
And it is now in the orbit that we expected it to. This is just an incredible day.
I've never seen
views
anything
there
like it. I don't
as
even
the
know what to
booster
say.
vents, some pressures there. That is a live view from the top of the tower looking at the chopsticks.
I am still in disbelief. I'm trying to catch my tears just like the chopsticks caught the booster. It has been nonstop since liftoff. And we are all so excited about everything that's been happening so far this morning. With the booster having completed its job for today, we are going to take a short break for the next 30 minutes. We'll return back at...
Oh yeah, Will, the sonic boom was definitely more audible than a Falcon 9 booster return. I was bracing for it because we could see, obviously I knew it was going to be loud because this is so much bigger than a Falcon 9, but we could actually see the shockwave as it was coming in during the landing burn, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a huge sonic boom, and it did not disappoint.
No, it was maybe a little bit tricky to track from our vantage point. It almost went up in basically it felt like a straight up trajectory from where we're watching. Of course, the path was going out due east over the Gulf of Mexico. But Marcus House, want to bring you in here. Moment of the mission.
I just don't even know what to say. I just don't even know what to say. I cannot believe that they just did it. The very last hard angle just before it hits the sticks, like, oh geez, that looks close. But it was just perfect. It was just perfect. I'm just absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm
sure
absolutely
there will
knocked by
be a lot of things that SpaceX will. Sorry, say it again, Marcus.
Oh, I'm just absolutely knocked by it. Like it's like a dream to see that happen. We've been sort of wanting to see this for years now, and I never really thought that they would get all the way through every abort mode. So it's extraordinary to see. And of course, given that they've just succeeded with this, right? Flight 6 is the same sort of profile unless they change something at this point, so they can fly Flight 6 again. They could probably take this booster and static fire it and see if there's anything broken. Like, how amazing to be able to see this. And anybody that doubts what SpaceX can do, you see an event like this, there is absolutely nothing that stops them. Yep, they have setbacks like anyone else, but that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. 70 meters tall that booster is, 9 meters wide, just caught out of the air. First attempt, smooth as butter.
And I think that all just plays back to SpaceX's heritage with its own flight hardware. I mean, the number of times that we've seen both drone ship landings, return to landing site operations, again and again, hundreds of times now at this point with the Falcon 9 rocket. Obviously, two separate programs, but one very much learned some key lessons from the other, and it all played into what we see now here with the chopsticks seeming to have a very firm grasp on the Superheavy booster here. Of course, it's still
man, I've got to almost
very much
watch a
ongoing.
replay of it.
Yeah, no, we'll see if we can hopefully get that and work to show a replay in just a moment here. Do want to note that, of course, while sort of the marquee excitement of the mission is now in the rearview mirror, and of course will be watched with great interest to see what all the lessons were from this moment. Do want to note that we are T plus 13 minutes 44 seconds and counting into this flight so far. At this point, the Starship upper stage is continuing to cruise. You see that live in the right hand of the two boxes in the split screen from the SpaceX feed here. Coming up at T plus 48 minutes and 3 seconds, the Starship entry will begin. And that'll be the next really big point in time for SpaceX, as they're going to see how well the heat shield tiles that were replaced and firmed up will certainly be at this point. Taking a look now at the live feed here, you can see some of the new camera angles, Marcus, that we were talking about seeing on the Starship. This looks like the opposite side of one of the flaps that we were seeing from the first flight, or maybe not the opposite side in full, but certainly a very different angle. You can really get a good sense of that full flap in that shot we were just seeing.
Yeah, certainly a different angle. The other one was sort of just slightly underneath, pointing more upward. So that's a great shot. They did show a shot of the booster close up on the chopstick arms there before, and you could sort of see discoloration in the steel. So, you know, from the heat, it's like, wow, that's just some of those small details. You could sort of dive in and investigate those for hours and sort of see all the new views that we've never been able to see before. We could spend days digesting just the shots of the booster as it's sitting there. It's really mind-blowing. I really... It gives you this confidence in what it is that they're doing, for sure. Like, you know, catching the booster out of the air. Even I said that was crazy. When they first announced that, I said, there's no way they're going to do that. That's just a stupid idea. It's not a stupid idea. They just did it. And, you know, for all the people that love to hate on what SpaceX are doing, you know, this is it's a world-changing event to be able to go to a fully reusable system like this. And, you know, if they can nail the Starship entry and catch that as well, which is what they aim to do, and as of right now, I don't see any reason why not. You know, the cost of mass orbit becomes tiny compared to what it is now, and we can really finally become a spacefaring species, a proper spacefaring species. And this is why we dream of it, right? You know, we can have space stations, we can have asteroid mining, lots of robotic, artificial intelligence-driven systems that can go out and mine resources. Who knows what's possible if we can just bring the cost down? And that's not even scratching the surface of it. Obviously, there's the Artemis missions, there's the missions to Mars that we dream of, which are further down the track. But, you know, these systems are just incredible. And when people say, no, look, they're not going to land a Starship on Mars, that's crazy talk. This was crazy talk. This was crazy talk. 10 minutes ago, this was crazy talk. So just put it into perspective. Those people out there that, you know, that love to hate on this stuff, there's plenty of people out there like it. I'm so thrilled to be part of a community that loves this so much. Best community I've ever been involved with in my entire life. And we've just seen literal, you know, the start of history right here. Really amazing.
And it is horrible to be witness to moments like this, and certainly I know I think I can speak for both Marcus and Stephen that, you know, we're all very appreciative that we are in a position to be here with you all live and seeing this, you know, chapter in space history, as Marcus was just so eloquently describing. And Marcus, you wanted to see the replay. We do have that replay ready for you, so let's go ahead and check in with that. This is from our colleague Adam Bernstein, his camera, while the re-entry of booster from a vantage point in South Island, so it'll have a nice arc as it come back through and makes its return to being caught at the chopsticks. As we're watching this, Marcus, you know, one of the sort of interesting things about this moment, besides the obvious, is, you know, SpaceX was able to see the aft end, or a good chunk of the aft end of the Flight 4 booster from the waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and now to be able to have that as a side-by-side comparison with flight hardware that didn't have to suffer going through, you know, corrosive ocean water and in the water of the Gulf of Mexico, and to be able to do a one-to-one comparison between that and this, what you're seeing here,
Just
I
look
think
at that.
that's going to be
amazing.
a very valuable data set for SpaceX.
Yeah. These views are going to be shared around the world, and that's why it's so important for LabPadre cameras, everybody else that's got live cameras out there, to have all different angles of this stuff. Because look at that. The angle that SpaceX showed of that looked a bit more steep. It looked a little bit more scary on the SpaceX feed, but right there it just looked perfect. Just perfect. And even like the engine cut off, the flames and stuff, they seem to dissipate fairly quickly. At first I was like, oh, hopefully it'll all settle down there, the flames that sort of came out afterwards. But it's hard to see how that could have gone better. I was trying to rewind there to see if the pins were sitting exactly on the chopstick arms where they needed to be for it to be reeled in, because they've got the special rails on the side there that move back and forth with this. Almost looks like this colossal big long drill bit. And I couldn't quite tell if it was sitting on there perfectly, but I think it was.
Yeah, it seemed to touch down or be caught where SpaceX was intending it to, right where it's being held. The additional interesting bits of data, as you mentioned, Marcus, you could spend hours going, over the visual pieces of data that are available about the booster that's just being suspended in midair. One of which that I'm very curious to see, and I'm sure SpaceX is as well, if they don't already have good camera views there, is if there may have been any compression of the Superheavy booster itself, where the chopsticks are holding it right now. If they, as they were testing it previously, used exactly the right amount of pressure to catch it and hold it in place, but not too much to squish part of the Superheavy booster. I think that's going to be something they're keen to get their eyes on, especially once it's safe to approach the vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to say, the views, I mean, we've kind of forgotten about the Starship to a degree. The views from Starship right now are the best I've ever seen. The views of the globe, I wonder if they've got a wider angle lens on this. I'll have to go and check the previous feeds. But the pale blue dot there below, seen from close up, is just breathtaking. Just breathtaking. And, how anyone cannot be inspired by this, I've got no idea.
I mean, certainly from a group of people who grew up as space fans, it's hard to fathom that you could watch something like this and not just think about all the things that are possible. Certainly, not everyone will go into aerospace engineering. Not everyone will be involved in the space program in one shape or form. But it does certainly spark the imagination of just thinking about what folks may have said is impossible for whatever rhyme or reason, and looking at a moment like this and thinking, well, maybe it just takes a little bit of extra elbow grease, a little bit of creative thinking, and there are a lot of problems that seem impossible to solve that, when you have moments like this, seem just a little bit closer to being reached.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little choked up there when it actually caught, and you could tell that it was going to hold. It's like, wow, that's... I really didn't expect it. I thought maybe there'd be an abort mode that would trigger before that. Everything had to have gone absolutely perfect. There's 1,000 things there that could have gone wrong at any point to abort that. So it seemed much more likely that it would sort of ditch just off site somewhere right at the end. But everything was just textbook. It looked like they'd done this 100 times before. This is it. I don't know what everybody else out there thinks. Those in the comments, like, it's a little hard to not be a bit choked up by that, and for us to be here watching it live. Most people will sort of see this on the news tomorrow, and I don't think any news organisation this time can put any negative spin on this. And what you sort of feel is this sense that, hey, we've just all collectively together, the 55,000 watching here on the Spaceflight Now side and thousands more on the lab side, we've just witnessed something truly incredible together that's never been done before. And I think that's something, like, we're all got to go and have a drink after this, right? It's just one of those things. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget what the year was. And I think this milestone here, on top of any milestone that's been achieved before, we've seen amazing things with Starships landing in their test flights early on, but nothing this crazy. And this really, when you see Starship up there orbiting around right now, you know, this is a commonplace thing. We're going to see this weekly, daily, even in the more distant future. And to think that's the future that we're going for is something extraordinary.
As we're continuing to watch this booster just hang in suspended air, which is still quite a remarkable thing, just sitting 4 miles away from this piece of hardware that's just gone to space and back and is now just hanging out right now. Do want to go to a close-up replay of the booster return. This coming courtesy of one of LabPadre's live cameras that is available 24/7. You can see just, my goodness, this video as it comes back in. Stephen, if you're watching just from this angle, just how clean that reentry was, and
just that last touch, like you just see it descend a little just at the end there. That must be the arms just taking that impact, because they've got sort of a meter, or I forget what it is now, a meter or two, almost 2 meters of give in them. So that little last,
we're just watching
it. You see it come down.
Taking a look at another pass through here. Just watching this a little more closely again this time, as you can see. It hovers for a second. It looks like the chopsticks didn't have to activate too much. That it was obviously they had already come in from the separation they were at when the rocket launched, but that they were pretty close to, at least from this just immediate replay from this camera perspective, pretty close to where they wanted to have it. So that just speaks even more to the precision of where the super heavy booster was coming back through, right, Stephen? I mean, is that kind of your read of it as well?
Well, Bill Gerstenmaier from SpaceX mentioned the other day that the water landing they did on Flight 4, they had a 0.5 centimeter accuracy, which really was almost too good to believe. But Gerstenmaier knows what he's talking about, and I take him at his word that they had that amount of precision, and it's hard to argue with the result today.
Yeah, just that sort of level of pristine accuracy that he mentioned when he was speaking before the National Academies. Obviously talking in greater context of the science that SpaceX will help assist with its, Falcon family of rockets through its Dragon capsule, both in free-flying missions as well as going to the International Space Station. But also, was asked about, the odds of how well this would work, and what Stephen just said, within a couple centimeters of accuracy from where they thought they were going to land in the Gulf of Mexico last time. I mean, that clearly gave them great confidence to go for it again here, and has so far proved out. Now, of course, one other thing that we'll continue to watch as this mission goes on, we're currently T plus 27 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. Got about a little more than 20 minutes from the start of Starship's entry here. So we've got a little more time to talk about the mission up to this point. Will be good to watch the ongoing performance of the chopsticks now at this point, continuing to super heavy boost, having through the catch sequence to see if there's potential structural issues that make SpaceX certainly doesn't intend for there to be, and likely would not have made this launch attempt or this catch attempt if they thought that was a possibility. But given this is the first time, and with any first time attempt of anything, there are lessons to be learned, and things can come up. So we'll keep our eyes and cameras trained on the super heavy booster and the chopsticks holding it upright. SpaceX will also have to safe the vehicle before crews are able to move in, and the road back to the orbital launch mount is reopened to even to SpaceX employees, but certainly back to the public. And so that process will involve, of course, offloading any remaining propellant that is still on there, letting that vent or boil off in a safe manner is going to be a really important safety component of this stage of flight. They want to make sure that, as has been the case with everything up to now, that they do that in a manner that protects not only SpaceX employees and the public writ large, but also all of the launch infrastructure there at the pad. Marcus, from your gauge, how long do you think safing the booster might take at this point? I mean, sort of given what we know about, how much propellant the Super Heavy booster used last time was going to use this time. It's kind of your read
Yeah, I'm
of
trying
that.
to sort of gauge how much propellant is left in it. I mean, they obviously didn't burn every single last bit of it because they would have had margin. So there's, based on the frost, there's a little bit in there. I would guess they probably, just to keep it safe, they probably just want to let it vent off, maybe. Which would take quite a while. So I don't know. Would they bring it down and let it vent off the ground, or is it better to let it vent up in the air? If there's any mishaps or anything, it's probably best for there to be lots of circulation and higher breezes up there. So maybe it's best just to kind of maybe wheel it in closer to the tower, because they can sort of move it to a degree and then let it vent off. I'm open to other people's comments on that though, because we are in absolute speculative territory at this point. We've never seen this.
Yeah, Stephen, if you want to weigh in on, your thoughts about what happens now at the Super Heavy booster and the possible or probable timeline for being able to safe it. I mean, we've heard anywhere from, a few hours to, depending on how this went today. Obviously, we talked to folks before this launch, before the catch, but, could take the majority of today, possibly into tomorrow, just to make sure that things are actually safe enough, given this is the first time, before they really, open the floodgates to people again. It's kind of your read on it.
Yeah, just from my perspective, looking at some of the camera views we're seeing, it looks pretty clean. And I will be eager to go out and take a closer look once the road is open. Certainly hope that's later today, if not tomorrow morning. I really, I'm going to stick around for a little while and see if I can get a little closer view of the booster and see its condition firsthand. But the videos look like it's pretty clean. Obviously, SpaceX is going to want to, like you said, safe the vehicle. There may be a little bit of propellant left in the tank. Not much, probably, but they want to get that off the vehicle, I'm sure, and want to make sure there's no damage, or make sure the chopsticks have a firm grip on the booster as well, I presume, before opening the road again. But typically, we've seen the road open a few hours after the launch, and I don't really see anything right now that would lead me to believe it'll be any longer this time.
I am seeing a few comments around sort of suggesting,
certainly
they'll probably put it back down on the
as we are
on the launch
now
mount and stuff.
32
but I
minutes,
don't think
33
so.
seconds and counting. Again, watching the progress of the ship upper stage. Want to go ahead and bring in another replay. This vantage point, I believe, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, this is from another one of LabPadre's cameras capturing the booster re-entry here. This is Rover 2. This was staged, as you can see, with Hopper in the foreground.
Oh, wow.
A nice bit of circular history here from the first to the present.
Geez, just seems so smooth.
Stephen, if you haven't already, let's go ahead and cycle this through again just to see that one more time, because we've got a nice angle on the chopsticks in this camera perspective. You can even see the shockwave as it was coming back through. It was quite remarkable.
Yeah, sure is. In the meantime, we have Starship cruising along fine, now well over 30 minutes into the flight. Everything is looking fine. SpaceX tweeted that out. All systems looking great. So we should be witnessing a nice entry here soon.
Yeah, we're poised for the next part of the show here and really getting a nice visual cavalcade of images from what you're seeing right here now live from the Starship upper stage. Just taking a look more closely, it doesn't appear as though any of the tiles are missing. Marcus, I'll let you be a second pair of eyes.
Interestingly, Interestingly, here in front of the camera view you'll see there's a couple of indented tile spots. You see 2 of them. I think there's actually 3. But there, I believe, the test tiles, I pointed them out in our video yesterday, but you'll see under there's 3 discolored tiles that look more grey. If you look closely, they're test tiles as well. And this is all those are on the payload bay area, so it's unpressurized. If they burn through, it doesn't really matter. So they've used those spots and spots at the bottom of the vehicle as little test spots to see if different versions of the heat shield will work or a lack of a heat shield will burn through fast. All these sorts of things that they can test on these areas of the vehicle that sort of aren't mission ending. If it burns through in the payload bay, no big problem. If it burns through at the aft section there, just behind the engines, no problem either. In fact, they're not going to use the Raptor engines, the vacuum engines again on this vehicle, right? There's no deorbit burn here. It's already on a trajectory that's going to re-enter. So the only engines that are going to fire up are the 3 sea-level engines for the touchdown. So even if there's a burn through that takes out one of the vacuum Raptors, it doesn't matter. So they're using that opportunity to test different configurations of the heat shield tile, I believe. So yeah, a few people have pointed out, there's tiles missing there. So no, they're not missing. They're just different ones. There's 6 of them. There was a nice close-up from Starship Gazer on that particular shot. If you want to check out his feed on X there's a great shot of exactly that spot.
I'll definitely take a look at that. Now, T plus 37 minutes, 19 seconds and counting on the SpaceX feed. 37 minutes, 32 seconds in real time. We are closing in on the beginning of entry now, just a little more than 10 minutes away. Stephen, I know that we're still very much in the middle of this mission, and it's almost like asking who's going to run in 2028 for president when we're, still casting votes in 2024. But thinking ahead to Flight 6 of Starship now, given that this very critical milestone seems to be about as successful as SpaceX could have wanted it, how do you think they're now thinking about the possibilities available to them in Flight 6? Since, there was a time around Flight 4 where they were thinking this catch would happen Flight 6, now would be that big push forward then. Do you think, possibly a relight of the Raptor engine on orbit is in order? Or do you think we're maybe going to see them try to put a payload on Starship? Do you think it's too soon for that?
I think it's probably too soon for a payload because I think they're going to want to demonstrate exactly what you said, a relight of the Raptor in space. They tried that a couple of missions ago, didn't happen. They aborted it before they even ignited because of, I think, the roll rate on the vehicle was out of spec. I think that is the next thing that I would be looking for, is a relight of Raptor, because I don't think they're going to want to put Starship in orbit, in low Earth orbit, until they can demonstrate they can bring it out of orbit, because Starship is huge and would create quite a remarkable piece of space debris if it was stranded up there, even for a short period of time. So I think SpaceX is going to want to demonstrate that they can bring it out of orbit and can guide it to a targeted reentry. And that, of course, requires the relight of the Raptors in space. I'm actually a little surprised that they haven't already tried to demonstrate that again. When we heard, I think in the May timeframe, that Flight 4 was not going to have a Raptor relight, that was a little surprising to a lot of people, because that seemed like a logical next step. But I think SpaceX prioritized recovering the booster, and the results are right in front of us here. That worked seemingly flawlessly today.
Well, and certainly I think SpaceX also didn't anticipate there being quite as much lag between flights 4 to 5 and then coming up to 6. So, the thought about, well, we can do less with 4 and then we'll just be on to flight 5, assuming it goes as well as we think it will. And then they ran into, of course, all the roadblocks we've talked about throughout the course of this broadcast, with some concerns and consideration to the sonic boom, some now resolved issues concerning the water deluge system, and some compliance that has now been rectified concerning some earlier flights of the Starship program. So now it seems like there's a rhythm that can be established, given that the launch license modification also cleared the way for a Flight 6. And it was interesting. I'm sure you poured through the emails from the FAA, Stephen, as well as all the documentation, and noted, and I'll bring this up here so I can read it verbatim. Bear with me as I'm calling an audible on myself and then was not ready for it. They said, and I quote from the FAA, the SpaceX Starship / Superheavy Flight 5 license authorization also includes FAA approval of the Flight 6 mission profile. The FAA determined the changes requested by SpaceX for Flight 6 are within the scope of what had been previously analyzed. Any modifications requested by SpaceX to the approved Flight 6 scope of operations may require further FAA evaluation. And then they end, contact SpaceX for additional detail. So I'm eagerly listening in, as I'm sure, Stephen, you are, to the SpaceX broadcast as well, and Marcus, for any updates concerning Flight 6 trajectory and mission goals that may come out during this Starship operation here that is still very much in work.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's very much unlike SpaceX to not change something. They're going to have another goal with the next mission, right? Whether it be, pushing some more boundaries with the Starship side of things, doing a full orbit and then going into a deorbit burn and things like this. So there's going to be things that will change, I'm sure, and that will probably require some evaluation. I don't think that will take very long, because after they've pulled this off, it's like, well, look, I mean, I think anybody can agree that catching a huge booster out of the air has got some safety concerns around it, right? No matter how you look at it. So they were going to be very careful with that goal. But now that they've done that, almost every other goal that's coming, you would see as almost less significant, with the exception of a Starship catch. Starship catch is a bit more difficult, by the way, because it has to come in horizontally and it needs to do its flip burn at the same time. So there's a bit more interesting sort of dynamics that you have to think of for that one, and it doesn't necessarily have the ability to come in and be scraped down the side like the booster can. So with the booster, if you sort of look back at the replay, the arms come in quite early on, and they sort of impact with the side of the booster, and they hold hard. So it would have been scraping right down there. It'd be interesting to see if there's audio of some of the noise of the scraping, but I reckon the engines are too loud to hear any of that. So yeah, look, I suspect there will be some updates for Flight 6 now that they've achieved this. But I would be surprised if we couldn't be 2 months away before flight. As far as we can see, there's nothing damaged anywhere. They've just recovered the booster, for goodness sake. Like, it's just incredible.
Yeah, no, all the footage, all the angles that we've got from this morning that are continuing to come in are just remarkable. And of course, we still have quite a bit of mission left to go. So, to those of you who are still with us, or maybe you've gone away for some coffee or morning breakfast and are just popping back in or popping in for the first time, welcome aboard. You're watching joint live coverage between LabPadre and Spaceflight Now, covering Starship Flight 5. If you haven't
Watching the
already,
live feed
as
there,
you're
we've got
popping-
some
go ahead, Marcus.
we've got some good descent going on there. You can sort of see the altitude dropping reasonably quickly, like, we're at 108, 107. It's not going to take long for this to tick down to re-entry altitude. So we're coming up here very quickly.
Yeah, we're just a couple of minutes from that point in time. A little more than 45 minutes to flight from the SpaceX feed. Taking a look at some of the heat shield tiles that are being held up by the SpaceX commentators there. Examples of both the flat and curved variants there, by the look of it. And as we've been talking through the morning, this is an upgraded version of the heat shield tiles versus what we saw fly on Flight 4. SpaceX continues to iterate on all elements of the Starship program, both on the rocket side as well as the ground side.
Here we go. Some entry heating coming on.
Yeah, you can start to see the plasma building, as Stephen was making sure I was noticing there. Appreciate that, Stephen. You can really see the pink hue building up as the plasma is getting more established here. Stephen, I'll bring you back in as we're starting to see Starship upper stage now making its entry back through the atmosphere. Stephen, just wanted to get your thoughts on this stage of flight. Obviously, we saw this once before with continuous views on the way down. What are you most keenly watching for with this element of the mission?
Yeah, I want to see what happens with the heat shield. It was pretty late in the entry, if I recall, on Flight 4 that we saw pieces of the heat shield, especially from one of the flaps, start to come off the vehicle. It was much later than this point in the entry, it seemed to be. So I'm interested to see in a few minutes' time, once it gets to a lower altitude, how the heat shield is holding up. But it is just remarkable that we're seeing all this live, as the Starship is sheathed in plasma through the Starlink network.
Well, I mean, to that point, it's kind of like an extended ad for the Starlink internet service. I mean, they've got the little bug at the top right-hand corner of the screen powered by Starlink. And, we saw this last time. And, if you own the rocket and you own the network and you own the dishes, why not plug your service and, flex its capabilities, as we're more than likely just a few days away from the next Starlink launch from Cape Canaveral.
Yeah, it is remarkable to see it.
Might recall as well from the last flight, so the altitude starts sinking reasonably quickly, which it is at the moment, and then as there's more atmosphere, the Starship can actually start to use lift to stop its descent, not stop its descent, but slow its descent, so it can skim along the top of the atmosphere and wipe off as much velocity as it can before it actually drops into the thicker part of the atmosphere. And what we're seeing now is actually plasma from quite high in altitude. At this point, you see that the speed isn't dropping that fast, just ever so slightly. As it starts getting down towards the 45 kilometer mark, it'll start rapidly depleting, and that's when the real forces start hitting those those grid fins and the small, intricate little curves that that come up through each area. So hopefully, this double thick heat shield is going to treat us much better than the last time we watched this. 26,000 kilometers an hour we're moving at the moment. So, we haven't knocked off a lot yet.
It's not over until the upper stage sings.
Absolutely. So what we're hoping to not see is tinges of green. Like we were seeing tinges of green quite early on in the entry last time, and that's sort of a sign that there's copper going missing or any number of parts of alloys going missing. So we're hoping to sort of see a fairly clean pink hue for a lot of this, I believe.
Yeah, so far the integrity of the ship is still holding strong, and now 71 kilometers in altitude and descending.
That double view there is something I don't think we've seen quite before. We've got a mirror of one of the flaps there.
Yeah, having both run simultaneously is, I think, going to be really interesting to watch, since we were seeing at a pretty close-up angle the breakup of part of the flap there last time. So hopefully we're not seeing any plasma pierce through that flap again this time. But obviously want to stress this is a test flight, and that's why SpaceX is launching and doing these missions, to be able to gauge where they are and where they still need to go.
Yeah. I'm intrigued about why we see those little bursts of sort of flame sort of erupt all of a sudden and then they disappear. I'm not sure exactly what causes that. I'd love to know, because we saw this in the last few flights as well. It doesn't seem like it's moving the fins in any way to sort of generate that effect. But every now and then you just get this little burst. I don't know if it's just a pocket of slightly thicker atmosphere or what's going on there. It's looking beautifully smooth right now. We've lost a couple of thousand kilometers per hour, down almost close to the 24,000 mark now, 69 kilometers in altitude.
Yeah,
you can sort of see the speeds dropping quite a bit quicker now.
I mean, you almost have to be just watching the telemetry data, the speedometer and the altitude monitor to really gauge motion, except for moments like that, because it's just such a smooth descent and it's such a consistent amount of plasma that's building up around it.
Could be that we're sort of seeing some discoloration in the steel there with the heat. The steel will sort of change to that sort of rainbow hue as soon as it starts heating up quite a bit. So that's all expected, of course. But
yeah.
At the moment, everything holding beautifully. Look how it's hovering there. That's 69 kilometers. So it's just kind of sitting there. It's not dropping anymore. So it's going to wipe off a lot at this sort of altitude, a few kilometers underneath. And as soon as it doesn't quite have the speed to keep that lift, then it's going to start sinking quite quickly again. I love trying to understand this re-entry profile, because it's quite unique. And the fact, as you say, the fact that we get to see all this, and I haven't seen the frame rate drop, I don't think. We get to see all this because the Starlink dishes on the vehicle pointing upwards away from the plasma, and essentially the Starship is punching a gigantic hole through the atmosphere, letting that signal get out, something that has never been done before, apart from with the previous Starlink missions, so previous Starship missions, I should say. So this is something that still blows my mind, and Starlink it becomes stronger every week as they add more and more units to the shells. So it blows my mind that we can do this at the same time. And, that's an amazing project of its own, right?
Certainly is.
Just incredible what's changed over the past 5 years.
And just want to note that SpaceX says that the ship upper stage is continuing on a nominal trajectory. So in addition to visually looking good, it also is flying the path that SpaceX intended for it. So that's a good update there from SpaceX now. 43 minutes, 30 or 42 seconds counting into the mission.
See, we've only dropped 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers now since we last talked about it, and we've dropped another 1,000 kilometers per hour almost. So it can sort of hang up here and just slowly bleed off speed for quite a while. And every 1,000 kilometers it bleeds up here is a lot less energy when it hits the denser atmosphere below. So we're just starting to see the altitude drop a little faster again. Wow, that fin looks beautiful.
Yeah, to your earlier point, Marcus, I am very curious about the coloration on the flap that we're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen, if that's just a lighting effect of the plasma, or if that's, a heat impact from the plasma itself, sort of how that's all playing together.
I'd really like to see a full screen view of the flap there, to be honest. I want to see that higher res view of it.
Yeah. It sounds like they're beginning to thermally condition the Raptor engines before they get ready to perform their landing burn now, nominally 10 minutes from now.
Yeah. Speed dropping really, really quick now. 61 kilometers. As soon as we sort of pass down through towards 50, it starts really coming off fast. Seeing some little sparks coming off, which can be an indicator of just some little pieces of metal getting hit. But they're hopefully just sort of, hard edges on various things.
Down to the 60 kilometers.
Yeah, Marcus, I was trying to recall exactly when, as far as height elevation, where we really started to see the break apart of the flap there, the forward flap. Do you remember about what height it was when that really started?
It's funny you say that. I'm literally trying to find that right now because I think it was down around the 45 kilometer mark. I'm just trying to find it.
That sounds about right.
It might have been right around here. I'm just scrubbing through. It looks like it was more like 55. So we're coming up to that point where if we were going to see the same burn through, it's going to happen right about now-ish.
Which is certainly
it's
a good
definitely
sign
a lot more energetic. I'm not seeing any green, though. We were seeing bursts of green in the last one earlier on, and I'm not seeing that this time.
Yeah, and we just heard that max heating has occurred, that as the vehicle is passing through max Q.
Oh, look, there's another flap area there. Couple of angles, 3 angles there. Don't see any burn through anywhere.
It almost looks like a mirror image.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Peak heating.
Yeah, the fact that they didn't lose really any frame rates during peak heating is, again, another testament to something else SpaceX is trying to exemplify, which is the stalwartness of the Starlink system that they've got on board this Starship flight. Now 55 kilometers in altitude, speed about to pass below 15,000 kilometers per hour. Now T plus 58 minutes, 14 seconds and counting into this mission on the SpaceX feed. T plus 58 minutes, 29 seconds.
There's a bit of a bright spot there on the flap in front of us. Hopefully it'll hold through okay. I mean, it's going to be quite normal for things to heat up to glowing temperatures, so hopefully we don't see a burn through. It's looking a little bit burn through there, though. I think that forward flap might be going.
The one at the top of the screen.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely
looks-
burned through, I think.
There does seem to be a little bit of heat coming through the middle of that flap. See those two pockets of orange glow.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yep. I
That's
see those
definitely not what
sparks.
definitely not what they wanted there. But I mean, it's holding together better. But there's going to need to be work done there. Obviously, it's a hard part of the vehicle because you're trying to have all the actuators doing their thing whilst having it fully shielded. See the back, the aft flaps don't seem to be suffering the same thing. So the forward flaps must be tricky. And this is why they've moved them, right? So the Block 2 Starship, those flaps have moved. So this probably is a problem that's already fixed in a future vehicle, right? So I think they kind of expect this. They've probably beefed this up, obviously, because it's doing better. But there's certainly room for improvement there.
Marcus, key in on that point. How different are the forward flaps on the version 2 Starship than what we're seeing fly right now?
Well, they're actually moved more towards the leeward side of the vehicle, so they're not quite in harm's way exactly where they are right now. So if you sort of imagine, they just shift more towards the silver side of the vehicle, the unshielded side of the vehicle. So that's going to help, and they're also just designed slightly differently. They've got a slight different profile on them, so hopefully that'll help. I mean, they're holding up a lot better. We're down under 8,000 kilometers per hour at this point, down under 40 kilometers in altitude. So, they are starting to toast right up there right now, though. Aft flaps looking great. And the heat shield in general is looking pretty good.
Down to 75 kilometers.
Vehicles pass through maximum entry dynamic pressure now with just about 7,000 kilometers to go, a little more than an hour into flight. And as we've been talking, we're seeing some noticeable, even more so, burn through of that forward flap. But hopefully, as we're thinking possibly the body of the vehicle as well, though we're watching to see any additional signs for that.
Yeah, I mean, some burn through there, but I mean, the last ones, the fins were basically hanging off at this point, so a certain improvement. And hopefully the actuators and all the mechanisms inside that flap are still working. I'm assuming that the other flap was probably in a similar condition. They'd be fairly uniform. We wasn't seeing the other flap, so...
Yeah, but you have to imagine that that's more than likely the case.
I'd say so. The forces would be pretty uniform over the whole thing. It'd be interesting to see what the camera views look like at this point. And I imagine, even though there was burn through, nothing was hanging off. The aerodynamics should have been holding up pretty good. The shielding on it seemed pretty good right through from the other angles.
Yeah.
It's obviously dark on this side of the world. This is closer to me coming in here now. For me, it's like 12:30 past midnight, so quite dark on this side of the planet as it comes in close to Western Australia.
Yeah, just given the trajectory and where it's set to splash down, would it be bright enough if you were on the actual coastline of Western Australia to be able to see any of this, or is it just too far off for?
It's still a long way out. Yeah. Still a long way out. I have to sort of see how far out from the coastline it is, but yeah, maybe you'd be able to see a little sign of it from high up. There's the flap. There's an aft flap there. Yeah, it's just dark, I think.
Yeah. Vehicle's now subsonic. Now 1 hour, 3 minutes, 11 seconds into flight. We're coming up on the landing flip in the next 2 minutes.
It's amazing how slowly it drops at this point. Like it's really almost floating in the atmosphere, gently down when you sort of really look at that. Look at the speed drop. Like it's just almost hanging there. It's barely dropping at all.
It's performing the belly flop maneuver.
Yep, coming down horizontally.
Standing by for the flip and then the landing burn.
Yeah, you'll actually see the speed just almost stop there, almost stop in its descent. So you can see why it needs such little fuel to land, because it comes right down to 500 kilometers per hour compared to the booster, which comes down much, much faster.
Exactly.
500 kph right there. Ah, geez, I want to see an engine camera.
We're just listening into SpaceX commentator just here for an update.
Saw the high altitude campaign. That's the unique thing about how Starship comes back. So we've bled off pretty much all of the speed we're going to. We're essentially at terminal velocity.
Starship is
Vehicle
at
remains on
and
target at this
remains on
point
target.
for SpaceX commentator on the loop.
Five to go.
Yeah,
Coming up
I
soon.
imagine
Landing
they're
burn.
much more precise in the
Yep.
control looks really nice.
Cruising into the landing flip and the landing burn here in the next several seconds. This should all happen very quickly. We've got views of this.
1 kilometer.
Approaching landing burn startup.
And here we go.
When the Raptor engines ignite.
I think that
If we are
altitude
unable to see
readout
that
needs some work.
illumination ourselves.
It sort of hits zero well
Startup.
before when it starts burning. Look at that.
That's a nice reflection of the engine burn. And it looks like a correct orientation for a splashdown.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, it's still got camera feed. It's... Wow. Oh, what have they got there? It just blew up. They've got a camera. They've got a boat out there.
Oh, wow.
Or a buoy or something. Wow. I want to see that. I want to see the camera from that.
I have to imagine that's a buoy. That they
Yeah,
wouldn't
it must
put
be, yeah.
a crewed boat that close to Splashdown.
Oh, I thought there might have been an autonomous type vehicle out there of some sort.
But if you just think about, as Stephen was saying in my ear, the fact that they had an aquatic asset that close to where it's splashing down and it's making its approach to it now, that tells you another point of data about just the sheer amount of accuracy that SpaceX has with this whole operation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was exactly on target. They wouldn't be there otherwise. How about that? She's just broken in half. Look.
And the fact that
Look, you can see the downcomer hanging out.
Wow.
So that's the pipeline feeding from the methane tank normally down into the aft section. So the aft section of the ship's just floating there, unless it's upside down and I'm looking at it the wrong way.
Well, you have to wonder now if this is in a position where they might be able to salvage any of the ship, given that they've got eyes on it so
you never know.
definitively.
Jeez, this has been quite the day. Apart from a little bit of burn through that they'll obviously improve with the already modified ship, this has just been a perfect mission.
Well, and just to note, as we're looking back at the orbital launch mount, you've still got the Superheavy booster suspended as intended. So
yeah,
it's just been, I think, nothing short of a spectacular success of a day for SpaceX. And of course, NASA has to be both thoroughly impressed and very pleased with how this mission has performed, and what this portends for the Artemis program and the ability for SpaceX to continue making iterative steps towards the rapid reuse and the increased flight cadence that'll be necessary for an on-orbit propellant transfer demonstration.
Yeah.
I think everyone's just got to be just over the moon, if you will, about this morning.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of the bigger challenges coming up, the propellant transfer from one vehicle to another, and those systems sort of need to kind of still be Yeah, well, I'm sure they're planned, but we haven't really seen much about how they're going to do it exactly. But you know, that it all seems like small issues compared to what they've just achieved. Honestly, like, you know, if they can do that, they can refill. Just incredible. I almost wonder, like, they've achieved so much. I almost wonder whether they're going to skip and almost go straight to like the first, you know, Starship version 2, because they've just achieved so much. It's like, well, what are they going to, apart from maybe do some deorbit burns and things like that? What are they going to achieve with the next booster that's currently in line, the next ship that's currently in line? The real changes are in the sec. Oh wow! Look at that shot from the tower. Did you see that?
That's amazing.
Oh, it was so smooth. Like it just sort of impacts just so lightly. It's literally like they've done it 100 times.
Yeah, that drone shot right there. That's pretty spectacular.
I've got the Mechazilla.
It would be a space
doing
extreme without the moonwalk by Mechazilla.
Yeah. Wow.
And you notice he even has the fedora like Michael Jackson does. Some of his music
videos.
Yeah.
Well, that was really something.
One on my bingo card, but that was, I think, a very SpaceX quintessential way to end their feed. I do want to bring in another voice of our partners here with LabPadre. So, Lewis, if you want to hop in here, we've got another person that's joining him as well from the LabPadre side of the stream. But first, before you bring in one of your videographers, just your takeaway from from the launch to the booster catch to the amount of success that the Starship upper stage seemed to have, landing in the Atlantic Ocean or the Indian Ocean, and then having that marine asset there to catch the whole thing. Yeah, no, it was just, as it's sort of hard to not feel redundant in the commentary here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next steps are going to be just wild to see. And it's not really like SpaceX to sort of take small steps. So I don't think they're going to fly something exactly the same again. There'll be some reasonable changes there. And I'm almost wondering whether they'll just start skipping vehicles because they've got others that are pretty close. Just to all of you out there in the comment threads watching away on either stream, by the way, just thank you so much for being here, being able to witness this with us. It's been such a bizarre thing.
Yeah, as Marcus was just saying, we were dealing with some audio issues on our end, but we've got the gremlins out of our system and want to go ahead and bring in Lab to give your first high-level thoughts on, the launch that we just saw, and then, bring in one of your colleagues who's been, out in the field doing some, videography on this whole venture.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm still trying to collect my thoughts and keep my heart from beating out of its chest. This was an awesome day. As Marcus said, it was a perfect day. And just to be here 3.5 miles away and see that thing just softly touch down like that, it was unreal. Unreal. I'm so glad that y'all are here to enjoy this with us. And, man, I'm at a loss of words, bro.
I was gonna say, like, you've got a perspective that I wish that I had.
In a time like this.
Yeah. So what was the sonic boom like, Lewis? Like being there on the ground. That's something that I can only hope to hear one day.
It was definitely louder than I thought it was going to be. It shook the platform that we're on, and I felt it just go right through my body. I wasn't expecting it to be that loud. I've heard the sonic booms out at the KSC press site before, and it was not that loud. So yeah, right. I can't wait for you to get down here one day and watch it with us, Marcus.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for a time when we can get sort of approvals on this thing when I can still get there, because it's sort of like a 40-hour journey for me. So we're trying to be able to make sure we get there at a time when it is approved. So hopefully with Flight Test 6 already kind of approved at this point, maybe we'll get approval with more time to spare, because, I'd love to hit there maybe early next year. it's crazy at this point that I haven't been able to make it because there's been something in the way every time. COVID was in the way for 2 years. I was supposed to come in 2020, still haven't made it. So yeah, we will get there. Be amazing to finally meet all of you in person.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hard to get away from the family too.
Yeah. Sort of like a week of traveling around to sort of do it back and forth. So yeah, not quite as easy.
So yeah, we have a special guest that's in our audio today. He's going to be one of our newest cam operators with us at LabPadre Space. Some of you out there may know him and or heard of him. Nick Arbaugh, the first Neuralink cyborg, is going to be our new camera operator, and he will be controlling our cameras with his mind. Nick?
Nick. That's not his name.
Nolan. I'm sorry, Nolan Arbaugh.
Yeah, that's fine. My brother's Nick.
How close enough.
Yeah, that's fine. It's okay. People get us mixed up all the time. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. This has been super cool. Got to hop on one of the cameras earlier and play around with it, and I mean, just being a part of this whole process has been pretty amazing, and I'm just as speechless as everyone else watching that launch.
Yeah, you've been up all night with us, watching and waiting and anticipating. What'd you think? Did you think it was going to really happen? Did you think it was going to actually get caught?
Honestly, no. I didn't even expect for the launch to happen. I was a bit worried. They had pushed it back a little bit, even though I'd heard like NASA had some launches, so it seemed like everything was going well. But they had like a 5-minute window that they could have pushed anything back if anything had gone wrong. So I wasn't too confident that the launch was going to happen altogether. But then it all kind of happened just very quickly, and then watching it get caught was just. I can't even believe that they did that on the first try. Like, one of my buddies is there. I was trying to get down there as well, but he was just floored as well. We were just kind of speechless together.
Oh yeah, man. We're gonna get you down here for the next one, man. We got to get you down here.
Oh, absolutely. I'm super bummed I didn't get to make it for this one. All I was thinking was, man, I want to be down there for the first time they catch it, and I mean, what are the odds they do it on the first time? But that's fine. I'm going to get down there at some point. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, so for, a lot of people know about Neuralink, and some people may not know a whole lot about it. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be the first Neuralink person?
Yeah. So about 8 years ago, I had a spinal cord injury, so I am a complete quadriplegic. I have no feeling or sensation below my shoulders, and Neuralink is a company that Elon Musk is a part of. Obviously, that's probably why a lot of people have heard of it. It's a chip in the brain, and it helps me control things with my mind. So right now, I can. I'm controlling a computer as we speak, just with my thoughts. And that's about it. I was super lucky to be chosen. It was just kind of a fluke thing. I just happened to fit the bill for what they were looking for. But that was about 9 months ago now, and things have been pretty great.
Wow. I was telling one of my best friends in San Antonio, Texas, where I grew up, telling him about what was about to happen with us and you being a part of our team, and he knows about Neuralink, and I told him about it, and he actually said, "Is that even legal to control things with your mind?"
Pending FDA approval, we'll see.
Yeah. Oh wow. How does that feel to be able to move things like that, on screens and stuff? Did it come natural? Did it take time to was there a learning curve with it, or does it just happen instantaneously?
Yeah, I'm so used to it now. I'm so numb to it. I have to take a moment from time to time to really think about what I'm doing, to, you know, put some serious like thought into the fact that I am controlling something with my mind. I'll be using it around people and they'll just kind of be floored. Their jaws will be open, and I have to remind myself that yeah, this is not something that you see every day. Um, but it was super intuitive. I think that's one thing that, when this thing becomes available to the public, people are going to realize right away is just how easy it is to use. It was very intuitive. There wasn't really any learning curve at all. They just showed me how to use it, told me how to use it, I guess, because they couldn't really show me anything, and it worked. That's about it. And at the beginning, things were a bit rocky because I'm the first person, but by the time it gets out to the public, all of the wrinkles are going to be smoothed out, going to be ironed out, and it's going to be so intuitive to people that I think it's just going to blow everyone away.
Wow. And so, like, just one last question for you here. Do you ever move things on accident?
Yeah, so it's crazy. The things that I've learned about this and that we've learned in general, I mean, we're just constantly blown away by this. I have fallen asleep with it on once and woke up a few minutes later and it was still moving and clicking things on my computer while I was asleep. It's because it's all correlated to the motor cortex. So, if you think about how your body might move a little bit while you sleep, that's exactly what was happening. And so yeah, I've moved a couple things on accident, really just on my computer, and I think that's part of the reason why they're a bit taking things a bit slower with being allowed to, just send this out into the real world and being able to control like heavy machinery or anything. That might get a little dangerous if they don't have all the kinks worked out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Nolan, we really are pleased and excited to have you as a part of our team. And of course, we're going to be getting back with you and getting you acquainted with the other cameras and get you experienced with moving some of the stuff around here for us. And I appreciate you coming on the stream and telling us about yourself. And we'll be in touch real soon.
Yeah, thanks, Lewis. I'm happy to be here. This is so awesome. I remember, you know, I think it was the Starship Launch 3 was the first one I watched. I'm very new to this, and it took my breath away. I was just kind of up in the middle of the night, happened to catch wind of it and watched it, and it was one of the most motivating things that I've ever witnessed. And I mean, that was 2 launches ago, and I can't believe we're here right now. So I am sold on all of this. I can't believe that this is even happening in our lifetime. It's so cool to be a part of, and I'm really glad y'all reached out to me because this is just a great opportunity to not even just talk about Neuralink a little more, but to be a part of other fields and show people like what Neuralink is capable of, and just network and meet really cool people. So thanks for inviting me out, and I'm really looking forward to working with you guys in the future.
You're welcome, man. I can't wait to get you in on more of these cams. You have a great day, man. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, you too. Take it easy, guys.
So, you ready to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I just want to put a couple of pins and close some loops from things that we had talked about before. For those who were interested in the other suborbital flight, the NS-27 mission for Blue Origin, Blue says they are standing down from that attempt today, and they will reschedule that launch for a future time. However, we do have a note from Blue Origin's CEO, Dave Limp, who, of course, is also working on their New Glenn rocket, which will be launching from Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It will also be looking to be reusable rocket and land its first stage on a drone ship or a landing barge. And Dave Limp, I'll quote him here, says, "Congrats to the SpaceX team on the whole mission today." So a nice extension of solidarity across different space companies, both with big reusability goals in mind in the future. And as we're taking our final looks now out at the orbital launch mount, you can see the Superheavy booster still suspended. We're seeing in the close-up shot what looks like the little bit of a frost line still remaining there, as SpaceX is, of course, continuing to save the vehicle and make sure that any remaining oxidizer or liquid methane that was still remaining on the Super Heavy booster is drained off, that the vehicle is fully safe to approach. And we'll watch to see if they are able to reopen the road, and the first response team from SpaceX will go in with the booster still suspended in the air, or if they'll wait to bring it down to the orbital launch mount before humans are allowed to approach. And with that, before we do fully sign off, Stephen just hopped in my ear. We do have one last replay. I believe this is of the booster landing. Is that right, Stephen? Yep. This. Before we go to that, though, as Stephen is getting that replay ready, this, of course, is not a slow week for any of us covering space. Back home in Florida at Launch Complex 39A, SpaceX is preparing to launch a Falcon Heavy rocket with a very important payload on board, NASA's Europa Clipper mission, a spacecraft that will go explore the ocean moon of Europa orbiting Jupiter. That mission's set to launch in the just past noon hours on the East Coast, and the Falcon Heavy is flying in a fully expendable configuration, so neither the center core nor the side boosters will be reused. So unlike the launch we saw today, there will not be a boost back burn. There will be no sonic boom for those side boosters, and it will be their sixth and final time flying in support of a Falcon Heavy mission. So we'll be preparing for that, and you can catch live coverage of that coming up tomorrow. Stephen, if the replay is ready, let's go ahead and roll with that.
That's just an amazing shot, that one.
Just a spectacular view, this from a range of different camera views, a combination of the SpaceX stream as well as our own cameras. Or this is all SpaceX, excuse me, with the moonwalking Megazilla, just to cap it off here. Before we go ahead and let everyone go, I want to turn it back over to Lab for some final acknowledgments and thank yous to the team. This has been a impressive joint effort between our parties. And actually just calling an audible here. So we've had Stephen and Marcus with us for quite a while now. I want to go ahead and turn them loose, since well, Marcus, I'm sure, is hopefully going to be able to get to sleep in the near future after busily watching all this action. So Marcus, thanks so much for joining us here on this dual LabPadre Spaceflight Now stream. Where can folks keep up with your work if they'd like to continue following what you do there?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the hospitality and for everybody joining and watching and just absolutely being fans of this craziness that we've just witnessed. I've still got quite a night ahead of me, to be honest, because I can't turn down after that. I've got to write something. I'll be online whenever you Google my name. Really, Google Marcus House, and you'll find the YouTube channel there if you want to follow along with me. It's been an incredible day, and I'll never forget this one. Thanks a bunch for the hospitality, Lab, Will, Stephen, all the people that have been involved in this stream. It's a huge effort. I've got nothing to do with it. It's a huge effort, these live camera systems, and the Lab team and Spaceflight Now, they've got huge roles. So thank you for supporting what they do, because that supports what we do. And we couldn't cover this anywhere near as well without the amazing work from everybody. So thank you so much. Yeah, we'll make sure that we're back here again for the next one. Who knows when that may be? I'm just blown away by the day. So, yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Marcus. And Steve and I will turn the mic over to you. Appreciate you spending your morning with us. Final thoughts, and where can folks follow your work?
Well, it's an honor to be here, and certainly a morning I will never forget. Crazy to think that this may be happening on a weekly, if not daily basis in the future. And it's really gives me some pause just to think about something like this happening on a routine basis. You can follow me at Stephen Clark 1 on X, or you can read my stories along with my colleague Eric Berger's stories at arstechnica.com, covering NASA, commercial space, international space. All the stuff's there, arstechnica.com.
And of course, every Friday, Stephen and Eric go back and forth on duties writing the Rocket Report, a good rundown on everything going up and occasionally some things coming back down. So be sure to tune in on Fridays to their website, again, arstechnica.com, for the weekly Rocket Report. But both Eric and Stephen tweeted out. So if you're on X, you can find the link there as well. Lab, back over to you.
Yeah, we just want to say thanks to the Rocket Ranch for letting us be a part of their party here. It was an awesome day, as I keep on saying. Anthony has hosted us here for a few launches now, and we love being here. We also want to say thanks to the Sapphire Condominiums, the Isla Grande Beach Resort, which help us out with our streams. Of course, special thanks to Lucid and Steve Young in the background making things happen for us. Rusty Buckets, our Discord administrator, which keeps everybody in line. Of course, all the mods and camera operators that help us out. We got, Marcus House, man, I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your expertise and your opinions. And Stephen Clark.
It's a pleasure.
I love having you all here, man. I'm stoked to have you all here. And of course, Chief was here tracking for us as well. We still have Chief as part of the team here. And last but not least, Phil the Whiz Kid, my right-hand man over here, helping me do all my duties, getting things done so we can bring you these live streams. And with that, I think that's about it. I think I feel my voice cracking a little bit after yelling earlier.
Adam, can you got to preserve the vocal cords and pace yourself with that.
Yes.
The celebration can get away from you.
Yeah.
And, most of all, what we want to celebrate is you, dear viewer, for wherever you're watching from around the world. We know this is, as I've said before during the broadcast, a launch with global interest, and we very much don't overlook the time and attention from our global audiences between the LabPadre and Spaceflight Now channels. So eminently thankful for your time and attention today. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to both Spaceflight Now and LabPadre. Both channels put out distinct and interesting content that is complementary and stands apart as well. But we love coming together for these live stream opportunities.
All the people out there that donated and gave us super chats and Venmo donations, we really appreciate your input there. It goes to great use to help us all and keep these live streams and equipment going.
Yeah, and just to double down on that, it takes quite a bit of behind the scenes effort to put together a live stream like this. Not just the equipment that's here, but also the people power. I know my colleague Adam is not on the mic right now, but he and I, made the 20+ hour drive from Florida, and Lab has, crew that have come in from outside of the state as well. So, again, very appreciative for those who are able and wanting to support both channels through the YouTube Super Chats, through membership subscriptions. You are what keep us independent and keep us going in the way that we do, and we can be more grateful for your time and attentions and your contributions, both monetary and just watching along, hitting the like button and subscribe. And with that, my friends, we have come to the end of this joint stream between LabPadre and Spaceflight Now. I want to thank everyone from both the LabPadre side of the coin, from Spaceflight Now, all of our wonderful moderators. As Lab said, it's been a day for the books, I think we can all say. And
yes, sir.
we're very much looking forward to being back with you for another big stream when Flight 6 rolls around, perhaps sooner than we all may think. Time will tell.
I think December.
Lab's putting his money on December. We will see. I think we're all just hoping it doesn't clash with the holidays because, you know, missions like this are holiday-seeking objects, if you will. But we shall see. For all of us here at the LabPadre Spaceflight Now teams, I'm Robert Smith. Once again, thank you so much for being with us for this joint historic live coverage of Starship Flight 5. Folks, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and until next time, we'll see you then.
LabPadre out.